What if I told you that the greatest conversations of the ancient world weren't spoken, they were walked? Long before satellites and smartphones, civilizations mapped their deepest beliefs, not on paper, but across deserts, mountains, and seas, through what we now call sacred pathways. These were more than just roads or trails. They were living, breathing networks of meaning woven from starlight, stone, and spirit that connected the daily lives of people to the cosmos itself. Think about that for a moment. We're used to seeing history through texts and artifacts, but what if the real story was etched into the earth itself, waiting for us to retrace its steps? These 27 sacred pathways formed nothing less than the spiritual and cultural spine of societies many of us have never even heard of. They guided everything from pilgrimages and trade routes to secret initiation ceremonies and celestial observations. Imagine walking a road where every turn aligned with the solstice sun, or sailing an ocean using stars your ancestors named after gods. These pathways weren't just about getting from one place to another. They were journeys into the heart of what it meant to be human in a vast and mysterious world. They shaped economies, inspired empires, and offered ordinary people a way to touch the divine. In this video, we're going to walk those paths together. We'll explore how the Maya built temples that doubled as astronomical calculators, how Egyptian souls navigated underworld rivers in search of eternal life, and how indigenous cultures used songlines to keep entire histories alive without writing a single word. This isn't just about looking back, it's about understanding a different way of seeing, one that connected land, sky, and spirit in a harmony we're only beginning to rediscover today. So come with me, let's step into the footprints of our ancestors and uncover a hidden layer of human genius, one pathway at a time. But what exactly do we mean when we call these ancient routes sacred pathways? It's a term that goes far beyond simple geography. Think of them not as roads on a map, but as threads in a vast, invisible tapestry, one that connected the daily lives of people to the cosmos, to their gods, and to the very essence of what it meant to exist. These were conduits of meaning. For ancient cultures, a pathway could be a physical journey to a holy mountain, but it could just as easily be the symbolic ascent of a temple ziggurat, reaching toward the heavens, or the perilous voyage of a soul through the underworld seeking rebirth. They were frameworks that gave structure to chaos, turning the unknown into a navigable landscape of ritual and belief. This intertwining of the physical and the spiritual is perhaps nowhere more visible than in wonders like the Nazca lines in Peru. From the ground, these are simply shallow grooves in the desert floor, but from above, they reveal themselves as colossal figures, a hummingbird, a spider, a monkey, so vast they seem to speak to the gods themselves. Their true purpose is still debated, but many researchers believe they formed a ceremonial complex, a sacred map walked by priests during rituals, perhaps to call for water or fertility from the skies. Similarly, across the Atlantic, the concept of ley lines in Europe suggests an ancient network of straight-track pathways connecting hilltops, stone circles, and springs, points in the landscape believed to be charged with spiritual energy. Whether these alignments were intentional or coincidental is still discussed, but the very idea speaks to a deep, human impulse to find pattern and significance in the world around us. To truly grasp the power of these pathways, we have to step into the minds of our ancestors, and that requires a blend of disciplines. Anthropology helps us understand the social rituals that gave these paths meaning, the pilgrimages that united communities, the initiation rites that transformed boys into men. Archaeology gives us the physical evidence, the worn stones of a processional way, the artifacts left at a mountain shrine, and comparative mythology reveals the stunning commonalities, how cultures separated by oceans and millennia all told stories of a great tree connecting the worlds, or a hero's journey through a labyrinthine underworld. These weren't just stories, they were spiritual roadmaps. At its heart, the concept of the sacred pathway reveals a universal human desire. It's the craving for connection, to be part of something larger than oneself, to understand our place in the grand scheme of existence. These pathways were the answer to that craving, providing a guided way to navigate the biggest questions of life, death, and the divine. They are a testament to a different way of seeing the world, one where every mountain, river, and star was alive with meaning, and every journey, whether across land or into the soul, was a step on a sacred quest. Now, let's turn our gaze to the skies above the Yucatan Peninsula, where the ancient Maya wove the very fabric of the cosmos into their cities and ceremonies. For them, the heavens were not a distant mystery but a vast, pulsating map, a celestial corridor of gods and time, and they built their world to mirror its precise, sacred movements. This was a civilization that didn't just observe the stars, they danced with them, engineering their entire society around the rhythmic breath of the universe. At the heart of this practice was their profound astronomical knowledge, a science so advanced it still astonishes researchers today. They tracked the cycles of Venus with an error margin of just 1 day in 6,000 years. They understood the complex patterns of solar and lunar eclipses, recording them in intricate detail within their bark paper codices. This wasn't mere stargazing for curiosity's sake. It was a form of high science dedicated to discerning the will of the gods and aligning human activity with the fundamental order of existence. The sky was their scripture, and the planets were the punctuation marks in a divine narrative. This celestial knowledge found its most breathtaking expression in their architecture. Take the towering pyramid of El Castillo at Chichen Itza. To a casual observer, it's a magnificent stone structure, but to the Maya and to those who understand its design, it is a colossal, functioning calendar. During the spring and autumn equinoxes, a breathtaking phenomenon occurs. The angle of the setting sun casts a series of triangular shadows down the northern staircase, which merge with the stone serpent heads at the base to create the undulating body of a massive snake. This is the descent of Kukulkan, the feathered serpent deity, slithering down from the heavens to earth, a direct, visible communion between the divine and the mortal realms, engineered into the very stones of the pyramid. But these celestial corridors were far more than just spectacular theater. They were the practical, beating heart of Maya life. The precise tracking of solar cycles dictated the optimal times for planting and harvesting maize, the sacred staple of their diet and culture. The appearance of certain constellations or planets would signal the beginning of specific religious festivals, times for offerings, and ceremonies to ensure the favor of the gods. Even political power was intertwined with this cosmic order. A king's coronation might be scheduled to coincide with a significant planetary alignment, legitimizing his rule by demonstrating his connection to the celestial forces and his ability to interpret their will for his people. In this way, the Maya created a seamless integration of the sacred and the secular. Their cities were not built upon the land so much as they were inscribed upon it, with temples, plazas, and even ball courts aligned to specific solar, lunar, and stellar events. Walking through a Maya city was to walk through a three-dimensional model of the cosmos. Every shadow, every alignment, every structure was a point on a sacred pathway that connected their daily existence to the infinite. Their world was a constant, living conversation with the universe, a reminder that human fate was part of a much larger, majestic, and orderly celestial dance. If the Maya looked to the heavens to find their sacred way, the ancient Egyptians turned inward and downward, mapping a profound spiritual journey through the terrifying and magnificent landscape of the afterlife. For them, death was not an end, but a transition, a perilous voyage through a realm known as the Duat, a complex underworld of caverns, lakes, and most significantly, rivers that every soul had to navigate to achieve eternal life. This was perhaps the most elaborately charted sacred pathway in all of antiquity, a detailed roadmap for the soul's most important journey. This incredible guidebook was the Book of the Dead, though the Egyptians themselves knew it by a far more beautiful and accurate name, the Book of Coming Forth by Day. It wasn't a single, standardized Bible, but a collection of spells, incantations, and vivid illustrations commissioned by individuals and inscribed on papyrus scrolls to be buried with them. Think of it as the ultimate travel guide and passport combined. It provided the deceased with the exact words to say to appease demonic guardians, the names of the gates they would encounter to ensure safe passage, and the hymns to sing to win the favor of the gods they would meet. It described a journey across a dark, watery realm, where the soul had to navigate a river of fire and survive encounters with monstrous beings like the Eater of the Dead, all while being ferried by the god Ra in his solar bark. This metaphysical pathway was made astonishingly tangible in the physical world. The tombs in the Valley of the Kings were not merely burial chambers, they were meticulously designed microcosms of the Duat. The long, descending corridors leading to the burial chamber weren't just architectural features, they were a physical reenactment of the journey into the underworld. The walls were covered in intricate hieroglyphs and paintings from the Book of the Dead, not as mere decoration but as a functional guide. A soul could literally read the walls, following the visual instructions to remember the right spell to open a door or to identify a god. The entire tomb was a sacred simulator, a controlled environment built to ensure the deceased would not get lost on their way to the Hall of Judgment. It was in this grand hall that the pathway reached its ultimate destination and its most profound moral test. Here, the heart of the deceased was weighed against the feather of Mat, the goddess of truth and cosmic order. This moment, the weighing of the heart, was the culmination of the entire journey. A series of 42 divine judges listened as the soul recited a negative confession, declaring innocence from sins like theft, murder, and falsehood. But the scales did not lie. If the heart, heavy with wrongdoing, outweighed the feather, it was devoured by the monstrous Ammit, the devourer of the dead, resulting in a second permanent death. But if the scales balanced, the soul was declared true of voice and granted access to the lush, reed-filled paradise of the Field of Reeds, welcomed by Osiris, the lord of the underworld. This entire intricate system did something remarkable. It made the sacred pathway of the afterlife the very foundation of daily morality. The promise of this final judgment and the hope for eternal life powerfully influenced ethical behavior. To live a righteous life, one in harmony with Mat, encompassing concepts of truth, justice, and right order, was the only way to guarantee a favorable outcome in the Hall of Judgment. Thus, the Egyptians' intense focus on preparing for death was, in reality, a powerful guide for how to live. It underscores a universal and enduring human yearning, the quest for transcendence, for a meaning that extends beyond our mortal years, and the deep-seated belief that how we navigate our life directly shapes the journey of our soul. Yet while camels carried silk and spices, they also bore something far less tangible but infinitely more transformative: ideas. The Silk Road was, in its truest sense, a sacred pathway, a sprawling, continent-spanning artery through which the spiritual lifeblood of entire civilizations pulsed and mingled. We often picture it as a route for merchants, but for every trader seeking profit, there was a pilgrim seeking enlightenment, a monk carrying scriptures, or a scholar translating sacred texts. This was a highway of the soul where the exchange of goods was deeply intertwined with the exchange of beliefs, creating a fusion of faiths that would reshape the world. Along the grueling stretches of this network, spiritual waystations emerged as essential oases for both body and spirit. Nestled in mountain passes or desert oases, Buddhist monasteries offered shelter to weary travelers. Inside their walls, a Zoroastrian merchant from Persia might share a meal with a Nestorian Christian monk from Byzantium, while outside their respective caravans rested. These were not just inns, they were international hubs of intercultural dialogue. Stupas, those distinctive Buddhist mounds housing relics, rose beside Zoroastrian fire temples and later Islamic mosques, creating a skyline of diverse devotion. A traveler moving from Chang'an in China to Antioch on the Mediterranean would have encountered a constantly evolving spiritual landscape, each stop offering a new piece of a vast, interconnected puzzle of belief. This constant proximity and exchange inevitably led to a beautiful, profound cross-pollination of ideas. Buddhism, traveling from India into China, absorbed elements of Taoist philosophy, leading to the distinct Chinese school of Chan Buddhism, which would later become Zen in Japan. Christian sects like the Church of the East or Nestorianism found receptive audiences deep within the Tang dynasty court, leaving behind the famous Nestorian stele of Xian as a testament to their reach. Artistic styles merged seamlessly. Hellenistic influences from Alexander the Great's old territories can be seen in the serene faces of Buddha statues from Gandhara, blending Greek realism with Buddhist spirituality to create a new form of sacred art. This was not the replacement of one belief by another, but a creative dialogue, a spiritual melting pot where traditions adapted, borrowed, and grew richer through contact. The legacy of this spiritual exchange challenges our modern, often rigid, conceptions of cultural and religious boundaries. It demonstrates that faiths are not static, isolated monuments, but living, breathing entities that grow and evolve through interaction. The Silk Road reminds us that connectivity has always been a catalyst for innovation, not just in technology and commerce, but in the deepest realms of human thought and belief. In our current era of global digital networks and renewed cultural tensions, this ancient pathway offers a powerful lesson that the most enduring exchanges are not of things but of ideas, and that true understanding often begins not with isolation but with a journey taken together. Leaving the sprawling continental exchange of the Silk Road, we now journey to the soaring peaks of the Andes, where the very stones beneath one's feet were imbued with a sense of the divine. The Inca Trail to Machu Picchu stands today as one of the world's most famous hikes, but to reduce it to a mere tourist trek is to miss its profound, original purpose entirely. This was not a path designed for recreation. It was a carefully engineered sacred highway, a stone ribbon weaving through the clouds that led pilgrims directly to the spiritual and ceremonial epicenter of a vast empire. The engineering itself was an act of reverence. Imagine a roadway meticulously paved with stone, traversing some of the most dramatic and treacherous terrain on Earth, ascending to mountain passes over 4,000 meters high, cutting through dense cloud forests and clinging to cliff sides. This was no simple dirt path. The Incas were master stonemasons, and their construction techniques ensured the trail would endure for centuries, a permanent fixture in the landscape. But this durability served a higher purpose than mere practicality. The sheer effort and skill required to build it were a testament to the importance of the journey it facilitated, a physical manifestation of their devotion to the powers that ruled their world. Dotted along this arduous route were waystations known as tambos, To a modern hiker, these might seem like simple rest stops, but they were far more. They were strategically placed ritual sites, often aligned with specific celestial events. A tambo positioned on a high pass might be oriented so that on the winter solstice, the rising sun would illuminate a specific niche in the structure, signaling a time for prayer or an offering to Intai, the sun god. The journey was therefore punctuated with moments of worship, transforming the physical exertion of the climb into a prolonged and moving ceremony. Each step, each rest, was an integral part of a spiritual rhythm. This pathway was the physical expression of a core Inca belief system centered on the concept of connection. The trail did not just connect Cusco, the imperial capital, to Machu Picchu. It connected the pilgrim to Pachamama, the Earth Mother, through every stone and mountain stream they encountered. It connected them to their ancestors, whose spirits were believed to reside in the dramatic Apus, or mountain peaks, that watched over the trail. And perhaps most importantly for the empire, it connected the outlying regions to the central authority in Cusco. By controlling this sacred journey, by being the providers of the infrastructure and the arbiters of the rituals, the Inca state reinforced its power and divine legitimacy, weaving social and political cohesion into the very fabric of the spiritual experience. Ultimately, arriving at the Sun Gate and witnessing the breathtaking reveal of Machu Picchu nestled among the peaks was the culmination of this layered pilgrimage. The city itself, with its temples, solstice markers, and sacred rock formations, was the destination. But the Incas understood that the transformative power was not just in the arrival, but in the journey itself. The struggle, the awe-inspiring vistas, the rituals performed along the way, all of it prepared the pilgrim to fully appreciate and enter into the sacred space. This seamless blend of incredible engineering and profound spiritual devotion shows us a society where infrastructure was never just functional. It was always inherently a pathway to the divine, a means of walking in harmony with the cosmos. Now let's travel to the vast and ancient landscape of Australia, where the very concept of a pathway takes on a completely different, deeply spiritual dimension. Here, for Aboriginal Australians, the entire continent is crisscrossed with invisible threads of meaning routes known as songlines or dreaming tracks. These are not paths you can always see with the eye, but they are etched into the land through memory, story, and most importantly, song. They are the living, breathing maps of a culture that has thrived for over 60,000 years, and they represent one of the most profound and holistic sacred pathways ever conceived. The foundation of every songline is the dream time or dreaming. This is not a past event in the way we might think of history. It is a sacred, eternal era when ancestral beings, often taking the forms of animals, plants, or humans, emerged from a formless earth and began to wander. As they moved across the barren landscape, they sang it into existence. With every step, they created rivers, mountains, and deserts. They called forth the plants and animals, and they established the laws, rituals, and languages for the people who would come after them. At the end of their journeys, these creator beings often transformed into features of the landscape, a particular rock formation, a waterhole, a towering cliff, infusing those places with their eternal spiritual essence. The pathways they walked became the songlines. A songline is, in its most practical sense, a navigational chart sung as a long, intricate song cycle. The lyrics of the song describe the landmarks, water sources, and natural features encountered along the ancestral being's journey. To travel across hundreds of miles of unfamiliar country, a person need only know the song. They sing their way across the land, and each verse corresponds to a specific location: a large gum tree, a distinctive pile of rocks, a bend in a dry riverbed. The song literally becomes a directional guide. If you are singing the verse about the honey ant, you know to look for the acacia trees it feeds on. The verse about the kangaroo might describe the open plains where it grazes. This oral map is astonishingly precise, encoding generations of intimate ecological knowledge about where to find food, water, and shelter. It is survival information woven into art. But to see songlines as merely a tool for navigation is to miss their deepest purpose. They are fundamentally a spiritual and legal document. The songs and stories associated with each track detail the creation laws set down by the ancestral beings, the rules for marriage, trade, kinship, and caring for the land. Performing these songs while walking the country is a sacred act of renewal. It is a ritual reenactment of the original creation, a way of keeping the world alive and in balance. The people are not just walking on the land, they are walking with the ancestors, maintaining a reciprocal relationship with every rock, every animal, every stream. This creates a worldview of breathtaking wholeness where the land and the people are utterly inseparable. The land is not something they own, it is something they are a part of, and they carry its story within them. This living tradition, sustained through an unbroken chain of oral history, stands as a powerful testament to the resilience of cultural knowledge. In a modern world grappling with environmental crisis and a sense of disconnection from place, the wisdom of the songlines offers a radically different paradigm. It teaches a model of sustainability based not on extraction but on relationship, on listening to the land and understanding our role within its story, not as masters over it. The preservation of these pathways is not about looking backward. It is about carrying forward an entire universe of knowledge that can teach us how to live with deeper connection, responsibility, and reverence for the world we all share. From the sun-drenched trails of the Andes, we now descend into the cool, shadowy depths of a completely different kind of sacred path, one not made of stone, but of myth, symbol, and the intricate workings of the human mind. On the island of Crete, the Bronze Age Minoan civilization left behind a legacy that captivates us not just for its stunning palaces and vibrant art, but for one of the most powerful and enduring symbols in human history, the labyrinth. And at the heart of it all lies the legendary tale of the Minotaur, a story that is so much more than a simple monster myth. It is a profound allegory for a sacred pathway of initiation, a ritualized journey into the darkest parts of the self with the promise of emerging transformed. The grand palace complex of Knossos, with its sprawling, multi-level layout of corridors, chambers, and courtyards, may have itself been the original inspiration for the labyrinth myth. To an outsider or a subject arriving from a simple village, navigating this vast, bewildering structure would have felt like entering a maze from which there was no easy escape. But for the Minoans, this complexity was likely intentional, serving a deep spiritual purpose. Archaeological evidence suggests that courtyards and open spaces within the palace were used for elaborate ritual performances, possibly involving a hypnotic, circling group dance known as the Geranos or crane dance. Imagine participants moving in a complex spiraling pattern, mimicking the turns of a labyrinth. This wasn't mere entertainment, it was a form of moving meditation, a way to alter consciousness and embark on an inward journey without ever leaving the palace grounds. This physical movement mirrored a profound psychological process. The labyrinth was a masterful metaphor for the subconscious mind. To walk its path was to willingly enter a state of confusion and disorientation, to surrender one's ego and familiar bearings. The ultimate confrontation at the center, with the half-man, half-bull Minotaur, represents the ultimate test, facing one's own inner demons, primal fears, and the shadow aspects of the self that we usually keep locked away. The hero Theseus, aided by the thread given to him by Ariadne, symbolizes the seeker who, with the guiding light of wisdom or divine aid, can navigate this inner turmoil, slay their fears, and retrace their steps back into the light, fundamentally changed by the ordeal. This was the essence of an initiation rite, a symbolic death of the old self and a rebirth into a new state of awareness, perhaps marking the transition from adolescence to adulthood or into a higher religious order. The power of this symbol is its incredible universality and timelessness. We see variations of the labyrinth pattern appear in ancient petroglyphs, on Celtic coins, and etched into the floors of Gothic cathedrals like Chartres, where it was walked as a form of pilgrimage for those who could not travel to Jerusalem. Today, the labyrinth continues to resonate. People walk modern versions for stress reduction, mindfulness, and creative problem solving. The act of following a single, winding path to a center and back again provides a structured container for contemplation, forcing a slowing down and a focus that is increasingly rare in our frantic, linear world. It offers a tangible way to navigate life's inevitable complexities and confusions. So how do we apply this ancient concept to the maze of modern existence? Our challenges may not be a literal minotaur, but they are no less daunting. The labyrinth of a stressful career, the tangled web of personal relationships, or the overwhelming maze of global information and uncertainty. The Minoan wisdom teaches us that the way through is not to fight the complexity or seek a simplistic escape, but to move through it with intention. We need our own Ariadne's thread, a grounding practice, a trusted mentor, a core set of values that we can hold onto to prevent us from getting utterly lost. It encourages us to see moments of confusion not as failures, but as necessary parts of a transformative process, trusting that the winding path itself has something to teach us, and that by courageously facing what we find at the center of our own struggles, we can find our way back out, renewed and wiser than before. From the sun-baked labyrinths of Crete, we now set our sights on a far more tempestuous and expansive sacred pathway, the churning, wind-whipped seaways of the North Atlantic. For the Vikings, the ocean was not a barrier to be feared, but a divine road to be mastered, a liquid highway that promised both earthly glory and a sacred passage to the afterlife itself. Their legendary longships, those elegant and terrifying dragons of the sea, were far more than just advanced vessels for raiding and trade. They were chariots for the soul, carrying warriors on a spiritual quest as profound as any pilgrimage by land. This journey was guided by a sophisticated blend of ancient wisdom and mythical belief. Under an open sky far from any recognizable coastline, Viking navigators became readers of a living cosmic map. They tracked the sun by day using a special crystal known as a sunstone, which could pinpoint its location even through dense cloud cover. By night, they followed the unchanging positions of the northern stars, constellations they knew by names from their sagas. But their guidance system went even deeper than the heavens. They observed the flight paths of seabirds returning to land, the subtle shifts in ocean currents, the color of the water, and even the species of whales that surfaced alongside them. Every wave and wind carried a message, a signpost on this vast, watery path. They often inscribed their ships and navigational tools with runes, not merely as decoration, but as powerful charms and dedications to gods like Odin, the All-Father, or Youve, the god of the sea, seeking their favor and protection for the perilous journey ahead. The ultimate destination for many of these seafarers was not a physical port, but a mythological one, Valhalla, the great hall of the slain. Norse belief held that warriors who died bravely in battle would be chosen by the Valkyries, Odin's shield maidens, and carried off to this majestic feasting hall. And crucially, the preferred mode of transport for a great chieftain was his ship. This belief is stunningly illustrated by the archaeological record, most famously in the Oseberg and Gokstad ship burials in Norway. Here, immense, seaworthy longships were hauled ashore, placed in deep trenches, and became the final resting place for their owners, who were buried with everything they might need for the journey: weapons, treasure, food, and even sacrificed animals and servants. The ship was then covered by a great mound of earth, becoming a permanent, symbolic vessel frozen in time, ready to sail its captain not across the oceans of Midgard, the world of humans, but across the mystical waters separating the realms of the living and the dead. It was a perfect fusion of practical engineering and profound spiritual metaphor. These sacred seaways, however, did more than just ferry souls to the afterlife. They became dynamic conduits for the living, creating a sprawling network of cultural exchange that stretched from the bustling markets of Constantinople to the windswept coasts of Newfoundland. As Vikings raided, traded, and settled, they carried not just silver and slaves, but also ideas, technologies, and artistic styles. A Norse arm ring found in an Irish hoard, a Slavic comb discovered in a Danish trading town, a snippet of a saga that echoes a story from the East. All of these are testaments to the connections forged along these routes. The values reinforced by their mythology, raw courage in the face of a chaotic world, personal honor, and the relentless pursuit of fame that would outlive one's mortal body, were the very fuel that powered this expansion. It was a self-reinforcing cycle. The quest for a glorious death that would grant entry to Valhalla encouraged the bold, adventurous actions that, in turn, expanded their world and enriched their culture. The legacy of the Viking seafarer endures not just in history books, but in the very spirit of exploration that drives humanity to this day. It reminds us that the greatest adventures are often born from a combination of tangible skill and intangible belief. The ability to read the stars paired with the courage to follow them into the complete unknown. Their sacred pathways were not safe or easy, but they were transformative, forever altering the map of the medieval world and demonstrating the incredible things we can achieve when we see a journey not as a risk but as a rite of passage. Leaving behind the salt spray of the Viking seas, we now step into the dappled, silent light of an ancient forest in Gaul or Britain. Here, the sacred pathway was not one you traveled across, but one you traveled into, a living, breathing temple without walls. For the Celtic peoples of Iron Age Europe, the heart of their spiritual world beat not in grand stone ziggurats or pyramids, but within the hallowed confines of the sacred grove. These were not merely clusters of trees, they were considered the very threshold between the world of humans and the realm of the gods, the ultimate pathway into the soul of the natural world itself. Within these secluded sanctuaries, the Druids, the learned priestly class, conducted their most profound rituals. Imagine a clearing deep in an old-growth forest, where the only roof is the canopy of ancient oaks and the only altar is a great moss-covered stone. This was their cathedral. It was here they communed with deities like Cernunnos, the horned god of the forest, animals, and the underworld, often depicted cross-legged in a meditative pose, a symbol of wild nature and fertile power. Their ceremonies were intricately tied to the rhythms of the cosmos. The solstices and equinoxes marked pivotal moments in their calendar, with the summer solstice likely involving great fires to celebrate the peak of the sun's power, while the winter solstice was a time to honor the darkness and await the sun's rebirth. The phases of the moon governed other activities, from harvesting medicinal herbs to conducting divination rituals, where they might seek omens in the flight patterns of birds or the entrails of a sacrificed animal. The grove was a university, a hospital, and a church all in one, a place for learning law and poetry, for healing with herbal lore, and for seeking guidance from the divine. Central to this entire belief system was a deep, animistic reverence for trees. the Celts saw trees not as inanimate objects, but as wise, ancient beings, each species holding its own unique power and symbolism. They were living conduits, their roots delving deep into the underworld and their branches stretching high into the heavens, physically connecting all three realms of existence. The mighty oak, with its incredible strength and longevity, was the most sacred, associated with the supreme god, and seen as a source of protection and wisdom. The quick-growing, flexible hazel was linked to wisdom and poetic inspiration. It was said that eating the salmon that swam in pools beneath hazel trees would grant you all the world's knowledge. The rowan tree, with its bright red berries, was a potent charm against evil spirits. This intricate tree alphabet, or ogham, was more than just a writing system. It was a complex symbolic language that encoded this deep spiritual connection to the forest. This harmonious relationship between people and their sacred groves was violently disrupted by the expansion of the Roman Empire. Roman historians like Tacitus documented with a mix of horror and fascination the Druidic practices, which they viewed as barbaric and a direct threat to Roman authority and their own state religion. The conquest of Celtic lands was therefore not just a military campaign but also a spiritual one. Roman legions systematically sought out and destroyed these sacred groves, cutting down the ancient trees in a deliberate act of cultural and religious annihilation. They understood that to conquer a people's spirit, you must first destroy the places where that spirit resides. This tragic history highlights a recurring and painful tension between an imposed, centralized power and deeply rooted, indigenous spiritualities that are intimately tied to the local landscape. The loss of the groves was a catastrophic severing of a sacred pathway that had guided Celtic life for centuries. Yet, the memory of these pathways was not entirely erased. Today, we are witnessing a powerful revival of nature-based spirituality that draws direct inspiration from these ancient Druidic traditions. Modern movements like Neo-Druidism and broader pagan practices seek to rekindle that sacred relationship with the natural world. While they do not claim to be a direct continuation of the ancient ways, they look to the past for inspiration, celebrating the solstices at stone circles like Stonehenge, honoring trees, and practicing ecological stewardship as a form of modern worship. This isn't about recreating the past, but about applying its core wisdom to contemporary challenges. In an age of climate crisis and profound disconnection from the natural world, the ancient concept of the sacred grove offers a vital pathway back, a reminder that true well-being is holistic, encompassing the health of the planet, the community, and the individual soul. It challenges us to see the forest not as a resource to be managed, but as a living temple to be respected and protected. Rising from the flat, fertile plains of Mesopotamia were man-made mountains that seemed to scrape the very heavens, the Ziggurats. These were not merely buildings, they were profound theological statements carved in brick and bitumen, declaring humanity's ambition to bridge the gap between the earthly and the divine. In a landscape without natural high places, the Sumerians, Akkadians, and Babylonians felt compelled to build their own, creating the first great skyscrapers of the ancient world, not for human vanity, but as a dedicated pathway for the gods to descend and for priests to ascend. The design of a ziggurat was a masterpiece of symbolic architecture, constructed as a series of massive, square or rectangular terraces stacked upon one another. Each level was smaller than the one below, creating a colossal stepped pyramid that could be climbed by a single, steep staircase running straight up one side or by a more elaborate spiral ramp. The core was made of sun-dried mud brick, while the exterior was often faced with fired bricks, some glazed in brilliant blues or lapis lazuli, which would have shimmered under the intense Mesopotamian sun. At the very summit sat a small, exquisite temple, the dwelling place of the city's patron deity. This was the San, the Holy of Holies, where only the highest priests could enter to serve the god. The entire structure was a physical representation of a near-universal mythological concept, the cosmic mountain, the place of creation where heaven and earth first met. By building it, the people were quite literally reconstructing the axis of the world at the heart of their city. This ascent was the central act of the ziggurate's existence. The priests would climb the towering staircases, a ritualistic journey that was both physically arduous and spiritually momentous. With each step, they were leaving the mundane world of humans below and moving closer to the realm of the gods above. At the summit, in the small temple, they performed essential rituals to care for the deity, presenting lavish food offerings, adorning the statue, and performing ceremonies to ensure the god's continued favor. This was not just worship, it was a form of cosmic maintenance. The well-being of the entire city-state, its crops, its prosperity, its victory in war depended on the success of this daily communion between the priest and the divine. The ziggurat was also an ancient observatory. From its unparalleled height, priests could track the movements of the planets and stars with pristine clarity, charting the celestial cycles they believed directly reflected the will of the gods. The ascent was therefore a journey of both prayer and science, a seeking of wisdom from both revelation and observation. Yet the function of these structures extended far beyond the purely spiritual. The ziggurat complex was the undeniable center of city life, a bustling acropolis that combined religion, administration, and economy. At its base lay vast storehouses for grain, wool, and other goods offered to the temple, which effectively functioned as the city's central bank and redistribution center. Scribes worked in adjacent buildings, recording transactions and managing the complex economy. Judges likely held court in its shadow. The ziggurat was the ultimate symbol of the city's identity and the power of its ruler, who derived his legitimacy from being the chosen servant of the city's god. The construction of a new ziggurat or the restoration of an old one was a primary duty of a king, an act that proclaimed his piety and his ability to mobilize the people and resources of the state. This seamless integration shows us a world where there was no separation between church and state. Governance was a sacred duty, and the pathway to political power ran directly up the steps of the ziggurat. The influence of this architectural concept echoes through millennia, a testament to its power. The ziggurat is the clear forerunner to the Egyptian pyramid, though with a crucial difference. While pyramids were sealed tombs focused on the afterlife of a single pharaoh, ziggurats were vibrant, active temples focused on the ongoing life of an entire community. The biblical story of the Tower of Babel is a direct, though moralizing, reference to these Mesopotamian structures, capturing both their awe-inspiring ambition and the potential for human pride. Even the soaring spires of Gothic cathedrals, reaching desperately toward the sky, fulfill the same deep human yearning that the ziggurat first embodied: the longing to build a pathway to the divine, to create a point of contact between our world and the infinite, and to literally elevate our existence toward something greater than ourselves. High in the mist-shrouded peaks of China, far from the bustling world below, another kind of sacred pathway wins its way toward the heavens, one that seeks not to conquer the mountain, but to become one with it. For Taoist seekers, the trails leading up mountains like Wudang and Huangshan were never merely routes to a destination. They were a moving meditation, a physical and spiritual discipline designed to refine the soul and unlock the secrets of immortality itself. This was a journey into the very heart of the Tao, the underlying principle of the universe, and it demanded a complete harmony of body, mind, and the vibrant, living energy of the natural world. The entire ascent was a deliberate practice of the core Taoist principle of Wu Wei, often translated as effortless action or action through non-action. This is not about doing nothing, but about moving in perfect alignment with the natural flow of events, like a leaf drifting on a current of water. A pilgrim climbing these steep, uneven trails would not fight the mountain or strive against it with grim determination. Instead, they would learn to move with a relaxed awareness, conserving energy, finding a natural rhythm in their breath and step, and noticing every detail around them: the sound of a stream, the pattern of moss on a rock, the way the light filtered through the ancient pines. The physical exertion of the climb was not an obstacle to enlightenment. It was the very vehicle for it, a way to shed the distractions of the ego and the mundane world with every step upward. The goal was to achieve a state of inner tranquility so profound that the boundary between the climber and the climb began to dissolve. Scattered along these pathways were temples and hermitages, often perched in seemingly impossible locations on cliffsides or hidden in serene groves. These were not just places of rest, but powerful nodes of spiritual energy. Here, pilgrims would stop to practice Qigong and Tai Chi, moving through slow, deliberate forms designed to cultivate and circulate Qi, the vital life force that permeates all things. They believed that this Qi was particularly concentrated and pure in these high mountain airs, drawn from the earth itself and from the dense, ancient forests. Meditation in these spots was aimed at absorbing this energy, refining it within the body through alchemical practices known as Nidin, or internal alchemy. This was a process of turning the base elements of one's own being, body, energy, and spirit into a refined essence that could transcend mortal limits. The ultimate aim was to become a Zion, an immortal, a being who had achieved such perfect harmony with the Tao that they could exist in a state of ecstatic freedom, often depicted as dwelling blissfully among these very mountain peaks. The profound cultural significance of these practices is recognized globally today, with many of these mountain ranges designated as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. They are protected not just for their breathtaking natural beauty, but for being living museums of a continuous spiritual tradition. Modern visitors, whether devout Taoists or secular travelers seeking respite from the frantic pace of urban life, still walk these same trails. They may not be seeking physical immortality in the literal sense, but they are undoubtedly drawn by the same ancient promise of these pathways, a chance to reconnect with a deeper, quieter part of themselves, to find balance, and to absorb a measure of the timeless wisdom that seems to whisper on the wind through the pine trees. In a world of constant noise and digital distraction, the Taoist mountain trail offers a powerful antidote, a sacred pathway that teaches us how to move through life with grace, awareness, and a profound sense of peace. In the vast and diverse tapestry of Hindu spirituality, the concept of a journey takes on a dimension far beyond mere travel. It becomes a sacred crossing, a deliberate step on a path designed to transform the soul itself. This is the essence of the Tirtha Yatra, a pilgrimage where the destination is not just a place on a map, but a state of being. The word Tirtha itself means a crossing place or a ford, a point where one can cross from the mundane world of everyday existence into a realm charged with divine presence. These crossing points are often physical landmarks: the rushing waters of the Ganges at Varanasi, the serene heights of the Himalayas at Badrinath, or the ancient temple complex of Rameswaram, where the stone corridors seem to hum with ancient prayers. To embark on a yatra, a journey to such a place, is to undertake one of the most profound practices in Hinduism, a ritualized pathway aimed at nothing less than the purification of one's karma and the ultimate goal of liberation from the cycle of rebirth, known as moksha. The scale of this tradition is almost incomprehensible in its devotion. Consider the Char Dham, the Four Abodes, a circuit of 4 Himalayan shrines that every Hindu aspires to visit at least once in a lifetime. The journey to Yamunotri, Gangotri, Kedarnath, and Badrinath is arduous, taking pilgrims through some of the most treacherous and breathtaking mountain terrain on Earth. Then there is the Kumbh Mela, a festival so massive it defies belief, held 4 times every 12 years at rotating sacred river sites. It is the largest peaceful gathering of human beings on the planet. For a few weeks, a temporary city of faith emerges from the riverbanks, complete with roads, bridges, and tents, housing tens of millions of devotees from every walk of life. In this vast, temporary metropolis, billionaires and beggars bathe side by side in the same holy waters, their social status utterly dissolved in the shared pursuit of spiritual merit. These events are powerful testament to the unifying force of sacred geography, creating a collective body of believers moving with a single purpose. This intricate network of pathways is not left to chance. It is meticulously mapped in the vast scriptural literature of Hinduism, particularly in the Puranas. These ancient texts are far more than simple mythologies. They are detailed guidebooks that provide the pilgrim with a complete cosmological and ritual roadmap. They narrate the legends of how a particular place became sacred, perhaps where a drop of Amrita, the nectar of immortality, fell during a celestial struggle, or where a deity performed a great act of compassion. They prescribe the specific rituals to be performed upon arrival, the precise mantras to chant, the correct offerings to make, the number of circumambulations to complete around a temple. This transforms the pilgrimage from a random trip into a highly structured spiritual exercise. Every action, from the first step to the final dip in the river, is imbued with symbolic meaning, connecting the individual's small journey to the grand, cosmic journey of the universe itself. A central and often misunderstood aspect of the yatra is the intentional embrace of physical hardship. Pilgrims often travel long distances on foot, braving extreme weather, sleeping in simple accommodations, and surviving on minimal food. This is not seen as an unfortunate side effect of the journey, but as an essential feature of its transformative power. The blistered feet, the tired muscles, the exposure to the elements, all of it is a form of tapas or spiritual austerity. This voluntary suffering serves a crucial purpose. It burns away impurities, quiets the distractions of the ego, and mirrors the soul's own arduous journey through samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. By willingly enduring physical challenge, the pilgrim practices detachment from the comforts of the body and focuses the mind entirely on the divine. The external journey across the land becomes a direct reflection of the internal journey toward self-realization. Ultimately, the tradition of the Tirtha Yatra showcases the incredible power of collective spiritual practice to shape and sustain a culture across millennia. It fosters a profound sense of community, or sangha, where individuals from disparate backgrounds are woven together by a shared faith and a shared goal. It instills immense discipline, as the rigorous demands of the pilgrimage require planning, patience, and perseverance. And most importantly, it provides a tangible, experiential pathway to transcendence, a chance for every individual, regardless of their station in life, to actively participate in their own spiritual evolution. It is a living tradition that continues to breathe, drawing millions each year to walk in the footsteps of countless generations before them, all seeking that sacred crossing from the temporal to the eternal. While the pathways we have explored so far have taken us across continents and through the underworld, one of the most influential sacred routes in human history requires no movement at all, at least not in the physical sense. This is the Buddhist Eightfold Path, a profound inner journey that maps the terrain of the human mind and spirit. It stands apart from the stone roads and mountain trails, offering instead a meticulously charted course for ethical and mental development, with the ultimate destination being nothing less than enlightenment itself, a state of perfect peace and liberation known as nirvana. This pathway is not walked with the feet, but with intention, awareness, and a committed heart. The genius of this system lies in its holistic and interconnected nature. It is not a list of 8 separate items to be checked off one by one, but a unified guide where each element supports and deepens the others. The path is traditionally grouped into 3 essential divisions of training: wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline. It begins with wisdom, which comprises right view and right intention. Right view is the foundational understanding of the nature of reality, specifically the truths of suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path leading to its end. It's the compass that ensures the entire journey is headed in the correct direction. Right intention is the commitment to that direction, cultivating thoughts of renunciation, letting go of attachment, goodwill instead of ill will, and harmlessness instead of cruelty. Before any action is taken, the journey begins with seeing clearly and choosing one's aim wisely. From this foundation of wisdom flows ethical conduct, which includes right speech, right action, and right livelihood. This is the practical application of one's understanding in everyday life, the way the inner journey manifests in the outer world. Right speech means abstaining from lying, divisive talk, harsh language, and idle chatter, instead using words that are truthful, harmonious, gentle, and meaningful. Right action involves ethical behavior through the body, principally by not harming living beings, not taking what is not given, and avoiding sexual misconduct. Right livelihood extends this integrity into one's profession, choosing a career that does not cause harm or suffering to others, avoiding trades in weapons, living beings, meat, poison, or intoxicants. These are not rigid commandments, but natural expressions of the compassion and understanding developed through wisdom. The final division, mental discipline, consists of right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. This is the intensive training of the mind itself, the core of the inner pilgrimage. Right effort is the energetic commitment to cultivating wholesome states of mind and abandoning unwholesome ones. It's the perseverance required to keep walking the path, especially when it becomes challenging. Right mindfulness is the cornerstone practice of present moment awareness, observing the body, feelings, mind, and mental phenomena with clarity and without judgment, as famously detailed in the Satipatthana Sutta. And right concentration refers to the development of deep, unbroken focus through meditation, leading to states of profound stillness and mental unification. Together, these 3 train the mind to be steady, clear, and powerful, capable of directly penetrating the ultimate nature of existence. This profound inner work, however, was supported by a vast physical network that spread Buddhism across Asia. As the Dharma traveled, monasteries and stupas were established along major trade routes like the Silk Road, serving as essential spiritual waypoints. A weary merchant or pilgrim could find not only shelter and safety in these communities, but also instruction, a place to meditate, and the companionship of fellow practitioners. These physical nodes, from the rock-cut caves of Ajanta in India to the great temple complexes of Dunhuang in China, provided the necessary support system for individuals to undertake the demanding inner journey of the Eightfold Path, demonstrating how the metaphysical and the material have always been intertwined in the spread of wisdom traditions. The timeless relevance of this ancient pathway is perhaps its most remarkable feature. While rooted in a specific spiritual context, its components are universally applicable psychological tools for navigating the inherent sufferings and stresses of human life. The modern secular embrace of mindfulness meditation, now a mainstream practice in healthcare, education, and corporate settings, draws directly from the practices of right mindfulness and right concentration. The emphasis on compassionate and ethical living addresses a deep hunger for meaning and integrity in an often fragmented world. The Eightfold Path endures because it offers a practical, profound, and deeply compassionate roadmap for anyone seeking to transform their mind, live with greater purpose, and find a genuine and lasting peace from within. In stark contrast to the bustling collective pilgrimages of the Hindu yatra, the sacred pathways of many Native American traditions turn inward into the profound silence and solitude of the wilderness. This is the Vision Quest, a deeply personal yet culturally structured journey where an individual seeks nothing less than a direct encounter with the sacred, a revelation of their purpose and place within the great web of life. Far from a casual camping trip, it is a rigorous rite of passage, a spiritual ordeal designed to strip away the comforts and distractions of the everyday self, leaving the seeker open and vulnerable to the guidance of the unseen world. The structure of a vision quest is both simple and profoundly challenging, typically undertaken during a pivotal life transition, such as the passage into adulthood, a call to leadership, or a period of profound grief or seeking. The individual, often with the guidance of an elder or medicine person, travels alone to an isolated, powerful place in nature. This site is not chosen at random. It is a location recognized by the tribe for its spiritual potency, a place where the veil between the physical and spiritual worlds is known to be thin. Once there, the seeker will remain for a number of days, usually 4, engaging in a period of fasting from both food and water, sustained only by prayer and their connection to the land. Without the usual comforts of society, exposed to the elements and the rhythms of the natural world, the quester enters a state of heightened awareness and receptivity. Every sound, the cry of an eagle, the rustle of leaves, the direction of the wind becomes a potential message. Hunger and thirst are not punishments but tools, honing the senses and focusing the mind entirely on the spiritual purpose of the journey. Certain landscapes have been dedicated to this practice for centuries, serving as enduring sanctuaries for these sacred encounters. A powerful example is Bear Butte in South Dakota, known to the Lakota as Motopaha. This ancient volcanic formation rises abruptly from the surrounding plains, a solitary sentinel that has attracted vision seekers from numerous tribes for generations. The entire mountain is considered a church, a place of utmost reverence. Today, you can see prayer cloths and tobacco ties, small bundles of cloth containing offerings, adorning the trees along its trails, physical testaments to the ongoing prayers and quests that take place there. The continued use of such sites creates a powerful living thread, connecting contemporary Native people to the practices of their ancestors, and affirming that these ancient pathways of wisdom are not relics of the past, but vital, dynamic traditions that continue to provide meaning and direction. At its heart, the Vision Quest embodies a set of values that stand in powerful contrast to many aspects of modern Western culture. It is a profound exercise in self-discovery, forcing the individual to confront their deepest fears, insecurities, and strengths without any external validation. The practice cultivates incredible resilience, both physical and mental, demonstrating that true strength often comes from a place of vulnerability and surrender rather than force and control. Most importantly, it is founded on a principle of reciprocity with the earth. The seeker goes to the natural world not as a conqueror or a tourist, but as a humble petitioner, asking for guidance and offering prayers and respect in return. This reinforces a worldview where humanity is not separate from or superior to nature, but an integral part of a conscious, communicative cosmos. In an age characterized by constant digital noise, material accumulation, and a growing sense of alienation from the natural world, the ancient wisdom of the Vision Quest offers a radical and deeply needed counter-narrative. It suggests that the answers we seek externally, in careers, possessions, or the approval of others might instead be found in the quiet solitude of a wild place, in the disciplined emptying of the self, and in the patient listening for a voice that speaks not in words, but in the language of the wind, the stars, and the animal spirits. It presents a pathway back to our most essential selves, reminding us that our greatest guide has always been, and will always be, the living world around us. Now let's journey to the sun-drenched slopes of Mount Parnassus in central Greece, where the very air was believed to hum with divine presence. Here, the pathway to the Oracle of Delphi was more than a simple road. It was a transformative corridor of faith, fear, and anticipation, drawing everyone from humble farmers to powerful kings toward the one place in the ancient world where mortals could directly petition the god Apollo for a glimpse into the future. This was not a journey taken lightly. A pilgrim's quest began long before they reached the temple steps, starting with a voyage across the treacherous waters of the Mediterranean or a long, arduous trek through the Greek countryside, a physical trial that itself was a form of purification, preparing the seeker for the profound encounter to come. Upon finally arriving in the bustling sanctuary town below the temple, the pilgrim entered a highly structured and ritualized process. The first and most crucial step was purification. Travelers would wash themselves in the sacred waters of the Castalian Spring, a natural fountain that still flows from the base of the mountain today. This was not merely about cleaning off the dust of the road. It was a spiritual ablution, a symbolic washing away of impurity and moral transgression that might offend the god. Following this, they had to make a financial offering, a pelanos, and then sacrifice an animal, typically a goat, on the great altar outside the temple. The omens from this sacrifice were the first critical test. The animal's behavior and the way it accepted the blow were carefully observed by priests. If the signs were unfavorable, the seeker could be turned away. Their journey for answers ended before it had even truly begun. This entire elaborate and expensive prelude served a vital purpose. It filtered the flow of petitioners, ensured their seriousness, and created an atmosphere of escalating tension and sanctity that made the final prophecy all the more powerful. Only after successfully navigating these preliminaries could a pilgrim hope to stand before the Pythia, the famed priestess of Apollo. Contrary to popular imagination, she was not a wild-eyed mystic, but often an ordinary, older woman from a local village, chosen to serve for life. On specific days deemed auspicious, she would undergo her own preparations, bathing in the Castalian Spring and drinking water from a sacred spring called Casotes. She would then descend into the innermost chamber of the temple, the Aditon, and seat herself on a tall, three-legged tripod cauldron. The ancient sources describe a strange, sweet-smelling vapor, a pneuma, rising from a crack in the earth beneath her. As she inhaled these fumes, often while chewing laurel leaves sacred to Apollo, she would enter an ecstatic trance state. It was in this altered consciousness that the god was believed to speak through her. Her utterances, however, were rarely clear. They were often frenzied, garbled, or nonsensical cries, the raw, unprocessed voice of the divine. It was the temple priests, the hosioi, who stood nearby who would interpret her ravings and translate them into the enigmatic, often highly ambiguous hexameter verses for which the oracle became famous. The answers these priests provided could shape the fate of the known world. City-states like Athens or Sparta would send lavish delegations to ask whether they should go to war or form an alliance. Individuals sought guidance on everything from marriage and business ventures to locating a lost object. The genius and the enduring power of the Delphic oracle lay in the ambiguity of its responses. The most famous example is that of King Croesus of Lydia, who was told that if he attacked the Persians, he would destroy a great empire. He took this as a favorable sign and launched his invasion, only to discover that the empire he destroyed was his own. This ambiguity was not a flaw but a feature. It placed the responsibility for interpretation back onto the seeker, forcing them to reflect deeply on their own situation and motivations. The oracle rarely gave simple yes or no answers. It provided a cryptic mirror, reflecting the complexities and uncertainties of the human condition itself, compelling people to think more wisely and act more cautiously. The physical pathway leading up to the temple perfectly reflected this pan-Hellenic significance. The sacred way was not a barren trail but a magnificent open-air gallery, lined with breathtaking treasures offered by grateful city-states. As a pilgrim climbed the switchback path, they would pass stunning small buildings, the treasury of the Athenians, the treasury of the Siphnians, each one filled with priceless offerings and spoils of war, a permanent stone and marble testament to the power of Apollo's advice. Further on, they would encounter thousands of statues dedicated by successful petitioners, alongside elaborate monuments celebrating military victories that the oracle had sanctioned. This walk was a powerful political statement, a visual narrative of Greek power, piety, and rivalry, all dedicated to the glory of the god who guided them. It transformed the personal spiritual journey into a shared cultural experience, reinforcing a common Greek identity among often warring states. The pathway to Delphi, therefore, was far more than a route to a prophecy. It was a crucial nerve center of the ancient world, a place where spirituality, politics, and intellectual life converged, offering a unique form of guidance that acknowledged a fundamental truth we still grapple with today, that the future is never certain, and the most important answers often lie in learning how to ask the right questions. Moving from the personal oracles of Delphi, we arrive at a spectacle of pure collective power and piety, the grand processional ways of Mesopotamia, where the sacred pathway was transformed into a magnificent stage for the gods themselves to walk among their people. In cities like Babylon, these were not mere streets but the central arteries of cosmic and civic order, engineered to dazzle the senses and reinforce the divine right of kings while uniting the entire community in a shared spiritual experience. The most legendary of these was the processional way leading to the Ishtar Gate, a breathtaking corridor of blue-glazed brick that served as the main thoroughfare for the most important religious festivals of the year. Imagine the scene, a raised, paved road nearly 80 feet wide, flanked by towering walls, each adorned with over 100 glazed brick reliefs of lions, the sacred animal of the goddess Ishtar, pacing with a fierce and majestic serenity. The symbolism was immediate and potent. The lion, a symbol of royal power and protection, was also the companion of the goddess of love and war, creating a seamless blend of martial strength and divine favor that any visitor or citizen would understand at a glance. But the true guardians of this sacred corridor were the even more fantastical creatures depicted on the gate itself and the walls of the approach. Here, alternating with the lions, were the Mushhashu, the sacred dragon of the chief god Marduk, a fearsome hybrid with the head and scales of a serpent, the forelegs of a lion, and the hind legs of an eagle. Alongside them stood the Urmamu, a powerful bull associated with the weather god Adad. These were not decorative motifs, they were a divine security system. In the Mesopotamian worldview, images held power. By lining the pathway with these mythical protectors, the Babylonians were actively invoking their presence to ward off chaos and evil spirits, ensuring that the path taken by the gods remained pure and sanctified. The very bricks themselves were a technological marvel, vibrantly glazed in lapis lazuli blue and golden yellow, designed to shimmer under the intense Mesopotamian sun, creating an awe-inspiring illusion that the entire structure was crafted from precious stone and metals, a literal slice of heaven brought down to earth. The primary function of this architectural wonder was to host the annual Akitu festival, the Babylonian New Year celebration. This was the most critical event in the religious and political calendar, a 12-day drama that reenacted the creation of the world and reaffirmed the king's mandate to rule. The climax was a grand procession where the statues of the major deities Marduk, his son Nabu, Ishtar, and others were taken from their inner sanctums in the Esagila temple, placed upon lavishly decorated ceremonial boats mounted on wagons, and paraded down this very avenue. The gods were literally leaving their homes to journey through the city, allowing the entire populace to see them, shower them with praise and offerings, and bask in their divine presence. The statues would travel through the Ishtar Gate out of the city to a special temple called the Akitu House, where a sacred marriage ritual and other ceremonies were performed to ensure the fertility of the land and the victory of order over chaos for the coming year. This public spectacle was a masterful engine of social and political cohesion. The procession followed a meticulously planned route that physically connected the three most important centers of power: the temple, the house of the god; the palace, the house of the king; and the public spaces of the city. This wasn't just a convenient path, it was a powerful symbolic statement. It visually demonstrated that the king's authority flowed directly from the gods, that the temple's blessings were essential for the state's prosperity, and that the people's role was to participate in and support this holy alliance. The king himself played a humbling part in the rituals, entering the temple of Marduk and having his royal regalia removed by the high priest before being struck on the cheek and forced to kneel before the god statue to confess that he had not sinned or neglected his duties. This act of symbolic humiliation before his ultimate reinstatement was a public reminder that even the most powerful man was merely a servant of the divine, a powerful check on his authority that reinforced the sacred contract governing all of society. The influence of this Mesopotamian innovation in sacred urban planning cannot be overstated. The concept of a grand, decorated processional way designed for religious pageantry became a blueprint for power. We see its echo centuries later in the Via Sacra of Rome, the ceremonial avenues leading to Egyptian temple complexes like Karnak, and even in the axial layouts of later imperial capitals. It established a template for using architecture and public ritual to forge a communal identity, to project state power, and to embed spiritual belief into the very bricks and mortar of daily life. The processional way of Babylon shows us that a sacred pathway can be a carefully crafted instrument, a tool for awe, a mechanism for control, and a brilliant, shimmering declaration that the city itself was a divine creation, a microcosm of the ordered universe, protected by mythic beasts and ruled by a king who walked in the footsteps of the gods. In the wake of catastrophic loss, a different kind of sacred pathway emerged, one not etched into the earth, but woven into the very fabric of a people's identity. The destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem in the year 70 of the Common Era was not merely the loss of a building, it was the shattering of the spiritual and geographical center of the Jewish world. With the primary place of worship and sacrifice gone, and the people forcibly scattered across the globe in what is known as the diaspora, a profound question arose: how does a faith defined by a sacred place continue when that place is inaccessible? The answer was a breathtaking act of spiritual adaptation. Jewish communities ingeniously recreated sacred pathways not through physical landscapes, but through portable, resilient institutions and practices that could travel with them wherever they went, transforming a story of displacement into one of enduring connection. The most fundamental of these new pathways was the synagogue, known in Hebrew as Beit Knesset, the house of gathering. This institution became the decentralized heart of Jewish life, a direct and democratic replacement for the centralized temple. In any city or village where a Jewish community settled, from the bustling ports of Alexandria to the remote villages of Eastern Europe, the synagogue served as a multi-purpose sanctuary. It was a house of prayer where the liturgy itself evolved to include prayers for a return to Zion, keeping the memory of Jerusalem alive in daily worship. It was a house of study where the intricate commentaries of the Talmud were debated, ensuring that textual knowledge would never be lost, and it was a house of community, a place for legal arbitration, celebration, and mutual support. This network of synagogues created an invisible web of sacred nodes across the map of the world, each one a miniature Jerusalem, allowing for a continuous spiritual life that was no longer dependent on a single geographical point. This portability of the sacred was made profoundly tangible through ritual objects. The most iconic of these is the Torah scroll itself, hand-copied with meticulous precision on parchment, housed in an ornate ark and carried through the congregation for reading. The Torah became a movable sanctuary. In times of persecution, these scrolls were often the first possessions to be saved, sometimes at great personal risk. Other objects created sacred space within the home. The mezuzah, a small case containing verses from Deuteronomy affixed to doorposts, transformed the entrance to a humble dwelling into a holy threshold. The Sabbath candles, lit every Friday evening, carved out a sanctuary in time, a 25-hour period of peace that was observed identically from a kitchen in Morocco to an apartment in Poland. These objects were not merely symbols, they were functional tools for mapping the sacred onto an often hostile secular landscape, ensuring that wherever a Jew lived, they could walk a path of ritual and observance. The ultimate expression of this pathway of memory was, and remains, the annual cycle of pilgrimage festivals, particularly Passover. While the physical journey to Jerusalem was now impossible for most, the festival was re-engineered as a profound temporal journey. The Passover Seder is a masterclass in immersive storytelling. Through specific foods, questions, songs, and the recitation of the Haggadah, every participant is commanded to see themselves as if they personally had gone out from Egypt. The bitter herbs taste of slavery, the salt water embodies the tears of oppression, and the matzah is the bread of affliction and haste. An entire family gathered around a table in Spain, or later in New York or Buenos Aires, effectively becomes a living theater, reenacting the Exodus and transmitting its lessons of liberation and hope directly to the next generation. This ritual ensured that the core narrative of journey and redemption was not a historical footnote, but a lived, annual experience, forging a sacred pathway through time itself. Simultaneously, the very conditions of the diaspora, the constant movement and interaction along trade routes, became an unexpected catalyst for intellectual and mystical exchange. As Jewish merchants traveled the Silk Road and Mediterranean sea lanes, they carried ideas in their caravans and ships. This is how the profound mystical teachings of Kabbalah spread from its heartland in medieval Spain to communities across Europe and the Middle East. A text like the Zohar could be studied in the yeshivas of Safed, influencing the practices of Jewish mystics, and its ideas could subtly filter into the liturgy and folk traditions of communities thousands of miles apart. These networks of trade and travel, while designed for material survival, inadvertently created a vibrant exchange of spiritual thought, allowing Judaism to adapt, absorb new influences, and develop rich internal diversity while maintaining its core tenets. The incredible resilience demonstrated by these diaspora pathways offers a timeless lesson in the preservation of identity. It shows that a spiritual tradition can not only survive the loss of its physical center, but can find new and profound ways to flourish. The key ingredients are a relentless emphasis on memory, a deep commitment to education that privileges literacy and textual engagement, and the unwavering strength of community, the understanding that the individual's spiritual journey is inextricably linked to the collective. Judaism's endurance through 2 millennia of dispersion, adaptation, and often persecution stands as a powerful testament to the human spirit's ability to forge pathways of meaning against all odds, proving that the most important maps are often the ones we carry within us and between us. In the spiritual landscape of Japan, the sacred pathway is not a single road to one destination, but an entire network of circuits woven through the very mountains, forests, and coastlines of the islands themselves. This is the world of Shinto pilgrimage, where the journey is a moving meditation on the presence of Kami, the sacred spirits believed to inhabit all aspects of the natural world. The most famous of these is the 88-temple circuit on the island of Shikoku, a route spanning nearly 800 miles that traces the legendary footsteps of the beloved monk Kukai, known posthumously as Kobo Daishi, the founder of Shingon Buddhism in Japan. While Buddhism provides the framework for this particular circuit, the pilgrimage is deeply infused with the Shinto sensibility of sacred geography, creating a unique synthesis where the boundaries between the two faiths beautifully blur. The journey itself is a carefully choreographed passage between the mundane and the sacred, marked by distinct physical and symbolic thresholds. The most iconic of these markers is the Torii Gate, a simple yet powerful structure of 2 vertical posts and 2 crossbeams that stands at the entrance to a shrine. Passing under a torii is not merely walking through an archway. It is a conscious act of leaving the ordinary world behind and stepping into a realm charged with spiritual presence. Along the pilgrimage routes, these gates, along with stone lanterns, Kame-nu guardian lion dogs, and the ever-present Shime, Nawa, the sacred rope festooned with paper zigzags, constantly remind the traveler that they are on hallowed ground. The path is designed to engage all the senses, the sound of one's own footsteps mixing with the wind in the ancient cryptomeria trees, the sight of moss-covered statues, the feel of cool mountain air, and the ritual cleansing of hands and mouth at a Temazuya water pavilion before approaching a temple. Every element works in concert to facilitate a shift in awareness, preparing the pilgrim for an encounter with the divine. This divine is understood not as a distant, singular god, but as the myriad kami that are inherent in the landscape itself. In the Shinto worldview, a waterfall is not just a waterfall, it is the dwelling place of a powerful spirit. A peculiarly shaped, ancient rock might be a kami, a grand old tree certainly is, and the mountain one is climbing is itself a great and powerful deity. The pilgrimage, therefore, is an act of walking through a living, breathing pantheon. The physical exertion of the trek, climbing steep slopes, navigating winding paths, enduring weather, is not an obstacle to spirituality but an essential part of it. The fatigue quiets the mind, the rhythmic pace becomes a form of walking meditation, and the stunning natural beauty inspires a profound sense of awe and humility. This harmonious integration of physical challenge and spiritual reflection cultivates a deep, experiential understanding of one's place within the natural order, not as a master over it, but as a humble participant in a world alive with spirit. What is perhaps most remarkable about these ancient circuits is their vibrant, living presence in modern Japanese society. While some pilgrims, known as henro, still undertake the journey in the traditional white clothing, wearing a sedge hat and carrying a staff inscribed with the name of Kobo Daishi to signify that the pilgrim is not walking alone, many others approach it in contemporary ways. Modern-day seekers might complete the circuit by bus, car, or bicycle, and their motivations are as diverse as they are personal. Some undertake the journey for religious devotion, others as a form of personal introspection following a life crisis, a loss, or a major transition. Many see it as a unique form of spiritual tourism, a way to disconnect from the relentless pace of digital life and reconnect with something more enduring. The pilgrimage has evolved, offering different levels of engagement, but always retaining its core function as a pathway for purification, healing, and self-discovery. This enduring practice demonstrates a stunning continuity of tradition, a thread that connects the Japan of centuries past with the hyper-modern society of today. It shows that the human need for sacred journeying is not diminished by technology or urbanization. If anything, it becomes more potent. The Shinto pilgrimage circuits offer a timeless antidote to the fragmentation of modern life, providing a structured yet deeply personal way to seek wholeness. They stand as a powerful testament to the idea that the most sacred pathways are often those that remind us we are always walking in a world filled with wonder, and that enlightenment might be found not only at a distant temple, but in every step taken with awareness and reverence along the way. While the sacred pathways of the Jewish diaspora were forged through displacement and memory, another ancient civilization engineered its spiritual authority directly into the stone and mortar of its city center. In the heart of ancient Rome, one road stood above all others, not for its length or its destination, but for the sheer concentration of power and piety it contained. This was the Via Sacra, the sacred way, and it was far more than a simple street connecting points A and B. It was the grand stage upon which the drama of Roman identity was performed, a meticulously designed pathway that physically fused the concepts of military victory, divine sanction, and political power into a single, unforgettable experience for every citizen who walked its stones. Imagine yourself as a Roman citizen on a festival day, pressed shoulder to shoulder with the bustling crowd, the air thick with anticipation. Your gaze is drawn down the gently sloping path of the Via Sacra as it cuts through the very heart of the Roman Forum. To your left and right rise the most important buildings in the known world, the Regia, the ancient office of the Pontifex Maximus, the house of the Vestal Virgins, where the sacred fire of Rome's hearth burned eternally, and the magnificent temples of Saturn, Vesta, and the divine Julius Caesar. The road itself was the central artery that connected these vital organs of the state, making every journey along it a lesson in civic and religious duty. You weren't just walking from one place to another, you were moving through a living, open-air museum of Roman glory and gods, a constant, tangible reminder that to be Roman was to be part of a sacred contract between the people, their leaders, and the deities who protected them. The most spectacular use of this sacred stage was the triumph, the highest honor a Roman general could achieve. After a major military victory, the Senate might grant him the right to a triumphal parade, a carefully orchestrated spectacle of raw power and divine gratitude. The procession would begin outside the city walls on the Campus Martius, the field of Mars, the god of war. The general, now called the Triumphator, would shed his military garb and don the regalia of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, a purple toga embroidered with gold, a laurel crown, and his face painted red like the god's cult statue. He would then mount a golden chariot and begin his slow, glorious ascent along the Via Sacra. Preceding him would be a river of spoils from the conquered land, carts groaning with gold and silver, captured weapons, and floats displaying paintings of the great battles. Most potent of all were the prisoners of war, the defeated king and his family, paraded in chains before the jubilant crowds. This was a powerful psychological display, transforming abstract military success into a visceral, undeniable reality for the urban populace. As the Triumphator proceeded along the sacred way, he was showered with praise, but the ritual was also designed to temper his pride. Standing behind him in the chariot was a slave who held a golden crown over his head while whispering continuously in his ear, "Look behind you." Remember, you are a man. This crucial detail underscored the delicate balance of the ceremony. It celebrated the general's superhuman achievement while ritually humbling him, reminding everyone that his success was only possible through the favor of the gods and the strength of the Roman state itself. The procession would wind its way up to the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill, where the general would offer a portion of the spoils to the king of the gods. This final act completed the circuit of power. Military victory earned on the frontier was brought to the sacred core of the city and formally presented to the divine patron, cementing the general's place in history while reinforcing the idea that Roman expansion was not mere conquest, but a divinely ordained mission. Beyond these extraordinary triumphs, the Via Sacra was the backdrop for the daily rhythms of religious and political life. It was the route taken by priests and vestals during annual festivals like the Lupercalia. It was the path senators walked to reach the Curia, the Senate House. For the average citizen, simply using the road for daily business meant participating in a low-grade, constant civic ritual, absorbing the values of the state through sheer exposure to its architecture and the frequent ceremonies. The road's design was not an accident. It was a masterclass in ideological engineering, using urban planning to teach a specific worldview. The legacy of this approach is etched into the design of modern cities across the world. The grand ceremonial boulevards of Washington, D.C., from Pennsylvania Avenue to the National Mall, directly echo the Roman model. They are not just transportation corridors, but intentional pathways of power, connecting seats of government to monuments, designed to inspire civic pride and nationalistic feeling during parades and public gatherings. The Via Sacra demonstrates with stunning clarity that the layout of a city is never neutral. It is always a physical argument about what a society values most, a sacred pathway designed to shape the hearts and minds of everyone who walks it. While the Via Sacra channeled the power of a single city-state, another ancient empire conceived of a sacred pathway on an entirely different scale, one that wove together a vast tapestry of diverse cultures across continents. The Persian Royal Road, a staggering engineering marvel commissioned by the Achaemenid emperors like Darius the Great, was far more than an early highway system. Stretching over 2,500 kilometers from the grand ceremonial capital of Susa to the bustling port of Sardis near the Aegean Sea, this road was the central nervous system of the largest empire the world had yet seen, a deliberate artery designed to pump not just goods and soldiers, but ideas and faith across the known world. The logistical brilliance of the Royal Road was unprecedented. To ensure the rapid movement of information, the lifeblood of any vast administration, the Achaemenids established a revolutionary relay system of royal couriers. Herodotus, the Greek historian, famously noted that these messengers, riding in a continuous relay of fresh horses and men, could cover the entire distance in just 7 days, regardless of weather or terrain. His words echo through history. Neither snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds, a tribute to their reliability that would much later inspire the motto of the United States Postal Service. Along the route, a network of over 111 fortified stations provided these riders with rest, fresh mounts, and protection. For merchants, these waypoints became vital oases for trade, while for diplomats and officials, they were secure hotels that made long-distance governance not just possible but efficient. This infrastructure transformed a collection of conquered kingdoms into a cohesive, manageable empire, where the emperor's will could be communicated and enforced with stunning speed. Yet the cargo traveling this road was not limited to royal decrees and satrapal reports. Perhaps its most enduring legacy was its role as a conduit for the empire's unifying state religion, Zoroastrianism. As couriers, merchants, and soldiers moved along the route, they carried with them the teachings of the prophet Zoroaster. At key points along the highway, distinctive Zoroastrian fire temples began to appear. These were not large congregational buildings, but rather sacred structures centered around an eternal flame, symbolizing the light and wisdom of the supreme deity, Ahura Mazda. For a traveler far from home, the sight of a familiar fire temple offering a place for prayer and community would have been a powerful reminder of the cultural and spiritual framework that bound the empire together. These temples served as constant, physical reinforcements of the religion's core dualistic philosophy, the eternal cosmic struggle between Ashad truth, order, and drudge falsehood, chaos, and the individual's responsibility to choose the side of good through their thoughts, words, and deeds. This deliberate integration of spiritual and political ideology was the masterstroke of the Achaemenid framework. The empire was a breathtaking mosaic of different peoples: Babylonians, Egyptians, Greeks, Lydians, and Medes, each with their own languages, customs, and gods. Rather than brutally suppressing these cultures, the Persian model was one of intelligent integration. The royal road facilitated this by allowing for the movement of people and ideas, while the promotion of Zoroastrian values like truthfulness, justice, and environmental stewardship provided a shared ethical foundation. It was a form of soft power on an imperial scale. By building this physical pathway and lining it with the symbols of a unifying belief system, the Persian kings created a shared identity. A subject in Egypt and a subject in Anatolia might never meet, but they both benefited from the road's security, followed the same royal laws, and were governed by officials who upheld the same basic principles against chaos and falsehood. The profound lesson of the Persian royal road is that the most enduring empires are built not just on military might, but on the infrastructure of connection. It demonstrates how physical engineering, the cutting of a road through mountains and across rivers, can be seamlessly married to spiritual and cultural engineering. The road did not erase local differences. Instead, it created a network that allowed diversity to flourish within a larger, cohesive whole, bound together by shared values and the tangible benefits of peace, trade, and safe passage. It stands as a timeless testament to the idea that the pathways which truly unite humanity are those that carry both the edicts of kings and the prayers of pilgrims, forever intertwining the flow of power with the search for truth. Yet while empires built roads of stone, another civilization was weaving a different kind of sacred pathway, one made not of brick or dirt but of sound, memory, and the human voice. Across the vast expanse of West Africa, for centuries before and even long after the arrival of written scripts, the most vital arteries of culture were not visible on any map. They were the routes traveled by the griots, the legendary oral historians and musicians who served as the living, breathing libraries of their people. These men and women were not mere entertainers. They were the sacred custodians of identity, walking a pathway of words that connected village to village, generation to generation, and the present to the very origins of creation itself. The griot, known in various languages as a jelly or daily, held a position of immense and complex power within societies like the Mandinka, the Fulani, and the Wolof. Their role was hereditary, passed down through specific family lineages, and their training began in early childhood, involving the memorization of epic histories that could take days to recite in full. A griot was a master of multiple arts, a historian, a genealogist, a storyteller, a musician, a poet, and a diplomat. They were the official record keepers of a community, possessing the authoritative knowledge of who married whom, which clan owed what to another, which king ruled with justice, and which warrior performed acts of legendary bravery. In a world without written archives, the griot's mind was the archive. Their voice was the living document, To lose a griot was to lose a chapter of history itself, making their journey between communities a sacred mission of cultural preservation. The instrument most synonymous with the griot's art is the kora, a magnificent harp lute with 21 strings stretched over a large calabash resonator. The sound of the kora is often described as heavenly, a cascade of melodic patterns that underpin and elevate the spoken word. But the music was far more than accompaniment. It was a mnemonic device of incredible sophistication. The complex melodic lines and rhythmic cycles acted as a filing system for the vast stores of information the griot carried. A particular rhythm might signal the beginning of a genealogy, while a specific melodic phrase could introduce the story of a great migration. The music itself became a pathway into memory, triggering the recall of thousands of lines of poetry and history. When a griot began to play, the very first notes told the audience what kind of story was coming: a lament, a celebration, a heroic epic, setting the emotional and intellectual stage for the history about to unfold. These performances transformed ordinary spaces into sacred grounds of collective remembering. At a village festival, a wedding, or a noble's court, the griot's recitation was more than a show. It was a vital social ritual. By recounting the heroic deeds of an ancestor, the griot reinforced the family's status and honor in the present. By narrating the moral failures of a past leader, they delivered a powerful lesson on justice and responsibility to the current one. Everyone in attendance, from the highest noble to the youngest child, was reminded of their place within a larger, interconnected web of lineage and shared destiny. The performance was an act of weaving the community tighter together, strengthening social cohesion and reinforcing the values that held the society intact. It was education and entertainment fused into a single, powerful experience that appealed to the heart as much as to the mind. In our current digital age, where information is infinite yet often shallow and ephemeral, the ancient model of the griot offers a profound and timely lesson. We have unprecedented access to data, but we often lack the deep, contextual, wisdom-based knowledge that was the griot's specialty. Their tradition demonstrates the incredible power of the spoken word and narrative to make information memorable, meaningful, and emotionally resonant. It highlights the importance of the human element in history, the tone of voice, the pause for effect, the interaction with the audience that a written text can never fully capture. The griot's pathway reminds us that knowledge is not just something to be stored. It is something to be performed, to be shared, to be experienced communally. It challenges us to consider how we might become better griots for our own era, finding ways to pass on our stories and values not just through digital files, but through heartfelt human connection, ensuring that the most important truths never get lost in the noise. Leaving behind the sun-baked trade routes of Persia and the rhythmic storytelling of West Africa, we now trace a path that has drawn millions of footsteps to a single, powerful destination in the misty northwest of Spain. The Camino de Santiago, or the Way of St. James, is not one road but a vast, sprawling network of them, a web of ancient pilgrimage routes converging from every corner of Europe on the cathedral in Santiago de Compostela, believed to hold the remains of the Apostle James the Great. For over 1,000 years, this has been one of Christendom's great sacred pathways, a journey that transformed the medieval world and continues to offer a powerful, transformative experience for modern seekers. In the Middle Ages, the motivation to undertake such an arduous journey was profoundly spiritual. A pilgrim might set out seeking absolution for a grave sin, performing a penitential act through the sheer physical ordeal of walking hundreds of miles on rough, often dangerous tracks. Others walked in hopes of a miracle, praying for healing from an illness for themselves or a loved one. Some went as an act of devotion, an ultimate expression of their faith. The journey itself was the destination, a prolonged meditation that stripped away the comforts and distractions of ordinary life. These pilgrims, easily identified by their wide-brimmed hats, sturdy staffs, and the signature scallop shell, the symbol of St. James tied to their cloaks, traveled a landscape of faith. They found shelter in monasteries and churches that dotted the route, receiving food and a place to sleep from religious orders dedicated to supporting their spiritual quest. Theirs was a world guided by faith in the most literal sense. By night, they would often navigate by following the Milky Way, which stretched across the heavens overhead. In fact, the very name Compostela is thought by some to derive from the Latin campus stellae, meaning field of stars, a celestial pathway mirrored perfectly by the earthly one beneath their feet. The impact of this constant flow of humanity was nothing short of revolutionary for medieval Europe. The Camino became a colossal engine of cultural and artistic exchange. As pilgrims from Germany, France, Italy, and Britain walked and talked, they shared ideas, music, and architectural styles. This cross-pollination gave birth to the magnificent Romanesque and later Gothic architecture that defines the great cathedrals and churches along the route. The town of Santiago itself became a magnificent European capital of art and learning, a melting pot where the intellectual and cultural currents of the continent mingled freely. For a fractured and often war-torn Europe, the Camino provided a rare, unifying identity. It was a shared project that transcended national borders and local conflicts, creating a sense of a common Christian world with a shared spiritual goal. This pathway did more than lead people to a relic. It helped weave the very fabric of a collective European consciousness. What is truly remarkable is how this ancient tradition has not only survived but thrived in the 21st century. The modern pilgrim might not be seeking a papal indulgence, but they are undoubtedly seeking something. The Camino's enduring appeal lies in its powerful blend of physical challenge, immersive history, and space for deep personal reflection. The simple, rhythmic act of walking for weeks on end has a way of quieting the noise of modern life, the constant ping of notifications, the pressure of deadlines. It forces a slowing down, a return to the most basic elements, putting one foot in front of the other, finding food and shelter, and sharing stories with fellow travelers from around the globe in simple hostels called albergues. The path itself becomes a therapist, a confessional, and a meditation hall all in one. People walk to mark a transition, a retirement, a recovery from loss, a search for a new direction. They discover that the journey is less about reaching the cathedral and more about the person they become along the way. The moment of arrival in the great plaza before the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela is a powerful culmination of this transformation. Pilgrims from all different starting points, the popular French way, the rugged coastal route, the solitary path from the south, finally converge, many embracing, some weeping, all sharing in the collective achievement. The sight of the swinging Botafumero, one of the largest censers in the world, billowing incense smoke through the cathedral's nave, is a sensory spectacle that ties the modern experience directly to its medieval roots. Yet for many, the true end of the journey is not the city itself, but the continued walk to the coast at Finisterre, which the Romans believed was the literal end of the known world. Standing there, looking out at the endless expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, the pilgrim has literally walked off the old map of their life, having shed burdens and gained clarity on a pathway that has guided human feet toward meaning for a millennium. Now we turn to a sacred pathway that unfolds not just across land, but across the entire globe, uniting over 1 billion people in a single, profound act of devotion. The Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca is one of the 5 essential pillars of Islam, a mandatory journey for every able-bodied Muslim who can afford it at least once in their lifetime. But to call it a trip is to miss its true scale and significance. It is a massive, synchronized movement of humanity, a river of faith with millions of tributaries flowing from every nation on earth, all converging on a single, ancient point in the Arabian desert. This journey is a powerful reenactment of ultimate submission, retracing the footsteps of the prophet Ibrahim, known in other traditions as Abraham, and his wife Hagar, whose story of desperate faith and divine mercy forms the very bedrock of the ritual. The heart of the Hajj beats with a series of powerful, symbolic rituals, each one a chapter in a story of devotion, sacrifice, and trust. The pilgrimage begins with pilgrims entering a state of ihram, donning simple, seamless white garments. This act is a profound social and spiritual leveler. The billionaire and the baker stand side by side, indistinguishable, their worldly status erased before God. The first sight for most is the Kaaba, the black cube-shaped structure at the center of the Masjid al-Haram, the Grand Mosque. Pilgrims then perform the tawaf, circling the Kaaba 7 times in a counterclockwise direction. This isn't mere circling. It is a physical manifestation of the soul's orbit around the divine center of existence, a powerful symbol of the belief that all life should revolve around the worship of the one God. From there, pilgrims move to the hills of Safa and Marwa, where they perform the sa'i, running or walking briskly 7 times between the 2 points. This reenacts the desperate search for water by Hagar for her infant son Ismail. According to tradition, her unwavering faith was rewarded when the angel Jibril struck the ground, causing the Zamzam well to spring forth, a spring that flows to this day. The climax of the Hajj occurs on the plain of Arafat, where pilgrims stand in prayer from noon until sunset. This standing, known as wuquf, is the essential moment of the pilgrimage. It is a rehearsal for the Day of Judgment, a day of intense prayer, reflection, and seeking forgiveness directly from God, stripped of all intermediaries. The journey concludes with the symbolic stoning of pillars representing Satan, affirming the rejection of temptation, and the festival of Eid al-Adha, which commemorates Ibrahim's willingness to sacrifice his son in obedience to God's command. For centuries, this spiritual journey was also an epic physical undertaking. Long before air travel, Muslims traveled to Mecca via sprawling, well-established caravan routes that became sacred pathways in their own right. From West Africa, the mighty trans-Saharan caravans, carrying thousands of pilgrims alongside gold and salt, would trek for months across the desert. From the east, ships filled with pilgrims from Indonesia and India would brave the monsoon winds to dock at Arabian ports. These routes were far more than just lines on a map. They were dynamic networks of hospitality, scholarship, and trade. Caravanserais fortified inns sprang up along the way, offering shelter, food, and water. Scholars and students would travel with the caravans, exchanging ideas and texts, which helped create a remarkably unified Islamic intellectual world despite vast geographical distances. The Hajj, therefore, was not just a spiritual act but a primary engine of cultural and economic exchange across the Eastern Hemisphere. In our modern world, the Hajj retains this incredible power as a force for global unity. Every year, it creates a temporary city of faith, a microcosm of the entire Islamic Ummah, or global community. In this space, all artificial divisions of nationalism, ethnicity, race, and social class are dissolved. A senator from Malaysia prays shoulder to shoulder with a farmer from Senegal. A software engineer from California shares a meal with a shopkeeper from Egypt. They may not speak the same language, but they perform the same rituals, wear the same simple clothes, and share the same profound experience. This is the ultimate lesson of the Hajj pathway. that shared belief can create a bond stronger than any border. It demonstrates that the most powerful journeys are those that remind us of our common humanity, our shared submission to the divine, and our capacity for compassion that transcends every barrier the world tries to build. Imagine stepping onto a sun-baked stone court, not for a game of leisure, but to participate in a drama that held the fate of the cosmos in the balance. Across Mesoamerica, from the Maya city-states to the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, the ballgame was far more than a sport. It was a sacred pathway, a ritualized, brutal, and deeply symbolic reenactment of the eternal struggle between the forces of creation and destruction, played out by human athletes who stood in for the gods themselves. The court itself was a meticulously designed cosmological map. The long, narrow playing alley, flanked by sloping walls, represented the liminal space between the earthly realm and the dark underworld of Xibalba. At the center of each court lay a profound symbol, a large circular stone ring set high on each wall. This ring was no mere goal. It was a portal to the heavens, the very axis mundi around which the universe turned. The objective was to propel a solid rubber ball, heavy enough to cause serious injury, through this stone ring without using your hands or feet, only your hips, elbows, and knees. The ball itself was a potent symbol, its bouncing, arcing movement mirroring the journey of the sun as it traveled across the sky each day and descended into the underworld each night. A successful shot through the ring was a moment of cosmic alignment, a miraculous event that echoed the primordial actions of the gods. This celestial symbolism was rooted in the foundational mythology of the region, most famously the Maya Popol Vuh. The epic tale of the hero twins Hunahpu and Xbalanque provided the sacred script for the game. The twins, legendary ball players themselves, were summoned to the underworld by its sinister lords to play the game. After a series of deadly trials and trickeries, the twins ultimately defeat the lords of Xibalba, outsmarting death and achieving apotheoses, becoming the sun and the moon. Every match played on the court was a re-staging of this mythic contest. The players were not just athletes, they were living avatars of the hero twins, and their opponents represented the lords of darkness and decay. The outcome was believed to have direct, real-world consequences. A victory for the hero twins was a victory for order, ensuring the sun would continue its daily journey, the rains would come, and the maize would grow. A loss could portend drought, famine, and cosmic disharmony, a sign that the forces of chaos were gaining the upper hand. With so much at stake, the political and social weight of the game was immense. Rulers often played in ceremonial games to publicly demonstrate their divine right to rule and their physical prowess, proving they were worthy intermediaries between the people and the gods. The ballgame was also a potent diplomatic tool. Disputes between rival city-states over territory or resources were sometimes settled not on the battlefield, but on the ball court. The outcome of a single high-stakes game could avert a war or dictate the terms of tribute, making it a critical instrument of statecraft. For the spectators, the game was a grand public spectacle that reinforced social hierarchy and collective identity. The vast stone courts, like the Great Ball Court at Chichen Itza with its awe-inspiring acoustics that amplify a whisper from one end to the other, could hold thousands of people. The roar of the crowd, the intense physicality, and the profound religious significance combined to create a powerful experience that bound the community together under the watchful eyes of their rulers and their gods. The most sobering and widely debated aspect of the ritual is its frequent association with human sacrifice. Carvings and murals at sites like El Tajan and Chichen Itza depict unmistakable scenes of ballplayer decapitation. For the Maya, this grisly act likely mirrored the moment in the Popol Vuh where one of the hero twins is decapitated by a bat god, only to be restored to life. It is believed that the captain of the losing team, or sometimes even the winning captain as the ultimate offering, would be sacrificed. This was not seen as a punishment, but as the highest honor, a direct, immediate passage to the afterlife and a supreme act of devotion that would appease the gods and guarantee the renewal of the world. The flow of blood was the sacred price for the continued flow of water and life. This seamless fusion of intense athletic competition, deep religious belief, and stark political power makes the Mesoamerican Ballgame one of history's most vivid examples of how a physical activity can be transformed into a complete sacred pathway, a ritual that connected the movement of a rubber ball to the very turning of the universe. From the sun-drenched ball courts of Mesoamerica, we now journey north to the deep, forested fjords of medieval Scandinavia, where a quieter but no less profound form of sacred synthesis took root. Here, the arrival of Christianity did not simply erase the Old Norse world. Instead, it engaged in a fascinating dialogue with it, creating a new kind of sacred pathway that led to some of the most architecturally and spiritually unique buildings ever constructed, the Nordic stave churches. These towering wooden structures were not just places of worship. They were powerful, physical negotiations between a new god and an ancient land, and the pilgrim routes that led to them were journeys through a landscape where both beliefs coexisted. Reaching these remote churches was a pilgrimage in itself, an integral part of the spiritual experience. Imagine a traveler in the 12th century, leaving their coastal village and setting off on a path that wound through dense, whispering pine forests, past waterfalls that cascaded down sheer rock faces, and alongside the deep, still waters of a fjord reflecting the towering mountains above. This was not the sun-baked road to Santiago. This was a journey through the very heart of the Norse sensory world, a world of mist, shadow, and the profound silence of the wilderness. The familiar spirits of the forest, the landvitir, were still felt in the creak of an ancient tree or the sudden appearance of a stag. By routing the pilgrimage through this landscape, the church was not fighting against the old ways but was subtly incorporating them. The journey became a bridge, allowing the convert to move from a world they knew intimately, one filled with its own spirits and powers, toward the new Christian doctrine, without demanding they abandon their profound connection to the land itself. It was a masterstroke of spiritual acclimatization. This brilliant fusion reached its breathtaking climax in the architecture of the churches themselves. To step inside a stave church like the one at Borgund or Ernst is to enter a space where two cosmologies collide and merge into a new whole. The fundamental design is unmistakably Christian: a nave, a chancel, an altar. But the soul of the building is deeply Norse. The most striking feature is the roof, a series of ascending, overlapping tiers that evoke the multiple levels of the Norse cosmos, from Midgard to Asgard, rather than the simple vaults of southern European churches. And then there are the carvings, fierce, serpentine dragons, once carved onto the prows of Viking longships to ward off evil spirits on the open ocean, now coiled around the eaves and door frames of the church, their job description updated to protecting this holy ground. These are not hidden symbols, they are prominent, proud declarations of a persistent cultural identity. Alongside these beasts, one might find runic inscriptions, not pagan spells, but prayers to Christ or records of the builders scratched into the wood, using the ancient alphabet of the Norsemen to communicate a new faith. This was not a case of mere decoration or reluctant assimilation. The stave church functioned as a deliberate gateway, a liminal space designed to make the transition into the Christian world you feel less foreign and more like a natural evolution. For a Norse farmer accustomed to believing the world was held together by a great tree, Yggdrasil, the forest of tall, central pine masts that supported the church's roof would have felt deeply familiar and comforting. The darkness inside, pierced by shafts of light from small, high windows, would have recalled the feeling of a sacred grove. The church became an architectural metaphor for the soul's own journey, entering through a doorway guarded by the old protectors into a new, illuminated understanding of the divine. It acknowledged the power of the old symbols while redirecting their meaning toward a new spiritual center. The legacy of these pathways and their destinations is a powerful lesson in the adaptive nature of faith and culture. It shows that the most successful spiritual integrations are not those that arrive with a sledgehammer, seeking to smash the old world to bits, but those that arrive with a chisel, carefully carving the new onto the sturdy, beloved foundations of the old. The Nordic stave church pilgrimage stands as a beautiful testament to the human ability to find continuity amidst change, to weave new threads into an existing cultural tapestry without tearing it apart. These churches, now carefully preserved national treasures, are more than museums. They are permanent records of a moment when a culture chose to build a pathway to the future using the sacred wood of its past. While the Vikings navigated by starlight and the Greeks sought answers from oracles, an ancient Chinese tradition was mapping the invisible currents of energy that flow through the earth itself. This is the practice of Feng Shui, and at its heart lies the concept of the dragon line's veins of vital life force, or Kai, that course through the landscape like a hidden circulatory system, shaping everything from personal fortune to the fate of empires. To understand this pathway is to step into a world, where the boundary between the natural world and human existence is not just blurred, but entirely dissolved, where a mountain is not just a geological formation but a slumbering celestial dragon, and the wind and water are active, communicative forces. The very name Feng Shui translates to wind-water, a poetic nod to the two fundamental, invisible forces that were observed to shape the visible world. The ancient masters noticed how wind would erode a mountainside over centuries, and how water would carve valleys and nourish plains. They deduced that if these elements could so dramatically shape the physical landscape, then the invisible energy that moved them, the Kai, must be even more powerful in shaping the intangible aspects of life, health, prosperity, and harmony. The dragon lines, or long mai, are the concentrated pathways of this Kai. Imagine them not as literal lines on a map, but as subterranean rivers of energy, flowing with varying strength and quality. Some lines might carry sharp, aggressive energy known as Sha Kai, while others carry benevolent, nourishing Sheng Kai. The goal of the Feng Shui practitioner was to become a master cartographer of this invisible geography, to locate these powerful currents and harness their positive flow. This sophisticated art of placement, known as geomancy, was guided by a complex set of principles drawn from foundational texts like the I Ching, or Book of Changes, and the classic Zhang Shu Book of Burial. The I Ching's system of trigrams and hexagrams provided a symbolic language for interpreting the dynamic relationships between different forces in the universe. A practitioner would use a special compass called a luopan, a marvel of intricate concentric rings marking constellations, directions, and symbolic associations, to determine the most auspicious alignment for a structure. This wasn't about superstition, it was a precise science of orientation. A home would be positioned to have a black turtle mountain at its back for support, a white tiger hill to its right for protection, a green dragon ridge to its left for vitality, and an open vermilion bird space in the front to allow the beneficial Kai to gather and enter. A grave site chosen with even greater care was believed to channel earthly Kai to bless the descendants of the deceased for generations. Even entire cities, like ancient Beijing, were meticulously planned according to these principles, with the Forbidden City positioned at the very heart of the dragon's energy to ensure the stability and power of the Ming and Qing dynasties. The most potent concentrations of this energy were believed to reside in certain sacred mountains and rivers, which became powerful nodes on this vast network natural pilgrimage sites for everyone from emperors to peasants. Mount Tai, the easternmost of China's 5 great mountains, is perhaps the most revered. For thousands of years, emperors would undertake the arduous climb to its summit to perform the Feng and Shan sacrifices, legitimizing their rule by communicating directly with heaven from this most auspicious point. But it wasn't just for rulers. Commoners also made the pilgrimage to pay respects to the mountain deity and absorb its powerful Kai, believed to grant longevity and clarity. Similarly, the winding path of a river like the Lai, curving gracefully through the karst peaks of Guilin, was seen as a perfect dragon line, its meandering flow gathering and nurturing positive energy, making the region famous for its breathtaking beauty and the inspiration it provides to artists and poets. In our modern era of climate crisis and often alienating urban design, the ancient wisdom of the dragon lines offers a surprisingly relevant and powerful paradigm. This is not about placing lucky charms in the corner of an office. It is about a holistic philosophy of integration. Feng Shui teaches that we are not separate from our environment, but in a constant, dynamic exchange with it. The principles of designing with the land, rather than against it, of orienting buildings to maximize natural light and shelter from harsh winds, of incorporating flowing water and living plants to purify the air and uplift the spirit, are now at the forefront of sustainable architecture and biophilic design. The quest to find the dragon line is at its core a quest to find our place within the natural order, to build and live in a way that promotes balance and well-being not just for ourselves, but for the living, breathing landscape we are an inseparable part of. Deep within the arid plains of modern-day Pakistan and northwest India, the remains of a metropolis whisper secrets of a pathway that was both profoundly practical and deeply sacred. The city of Mohenjo-Daro, a jewel of the Indus Valley civilization that thrived over 4,000 years ago, reveals a layout so meticulously ordered it feels almost modern. Its wide, straight streets were laid out in a precise grid pattern, a marvel of urban planning that would not be seen again on such a scale for millennia. But these were not merely functional thoroughfares for carts and commerce. They were carefully designed conduits that channeled the life of the city toward its spiritual heart. The main arteries of the city all seem to lead toward a central, astonishing complex, the Great Bath. This structure is not like anything found in contemporary Mesopotamia or Egypt. It is a large, waterproofed pool made of finely fitted bricks, sealed with a layer of bitumen, and surrounded by a colonnade and rooms. It was clearly not for public bathing or mundane water storage. The sheer sophistication of its construction, complete with a sophisticated system for filling, draining, and maintaining the water's purity, points to a purpose far more significant, a central stage for elaborate public rituals of purification. The act of moving through the city toward this bath was likely a ritual in itself. Imagine a procession of priests or designated individuals walking the baked brick streets, leaving the bustling, residential neighborhoods with their uniform houses and well systems. They would pass through the quiet, administrative quarters with their large, pillared halls, the air growing still with anticipation. The final approach to the elevated citadel complex, where the Great Bath resides, would have felt like an ascent into a different realm, separating the sacred from the profane. This physical journey from the ordered streets of daily life to the still waters of the bath mirrored an inner journey toward spiritual cleanliness, water, as the source of life in an often harsh climate, would have held immense symbolic power. Ritual immersion in the sanctified waters of the bath was probably believed to wash away not just physical dirt, but spiritual impurity, perhaps preparing individuals for worship, initiating them into religious mysteries, or marking important seasonal festivals tied to the vital monsoon cycles that sustained their agriculture. This seamless integration of the spiritual and the municipal is what makes the Indus Valley civilization so breathtakingly advanced and so enigmatic. The entire city functioned as a single, interconnected organism designed to support this sacred way of life. Beneath those gridded streets ran the world's first comprehensive urban sanitation system, a network of drains and clay pipes that carried waste away from homes and public buildings, demonstrating an unprecedented concern for public health and hygiene that was almost certainly linked to their religious concepts of purity. Centralized granaries stored surplus food, suggesting a highly organized and likely theocratic administration that could coordinate resources for large public works and perhaps feed participants during major religious ceremonies. The evidence points toward a society that did not compartmentalize its faith. Instead, spirituality was the mortar that held the bricks of their civilization together, informing everything from the direction a street faced to the way water was managed. And yet, for all its evident sophistication, the Indus Valley civilization guarded its deepest secrets fiercely. Their written script, found on thousands of small seal stones and tablets, remains undeciphered, a locked door to their thoughts, their myths, and the names of their gods. We see tantalizing hints on these seals, recurring motifs of a figure sitting in a yoga-like posture, surrounded by animals who some scholars call a proto-Shiva, suggesting a precursor to later Hindu deities. We see vivid depictions of a powerful, horned buffalo being confronted by a figure in a ceremonial headdress, and of course, the famous unicorn motif. But without a Rosetta Stone to unlock their language, we cannot know the stories these images were meant to tell. The Great Bath itself stands silent. We can infer its ritual purpose from its design and from comparisons to later South Asian traditions where ritual bathing remains central, but we cannot know the exact prayers that were spoken there or the specific deities to whom they were devoted. This profound mystery makes the Indus Valley a powerful corrective to our assumptions about antiquity. Here was a society that achieved staggering heights of urban planning and social organization, apparently without the massive militaristic empires or grand, egotistical monuments of kings that we see elsewhere. Their power seems to have been derived from collective well-being, sophisticated engineering, and a shared spiritual practice centered on purity and water. They challenge the stereotype of ancient peoples as primitive or solely driven by conquest. The gridded streets leading to the silent, solemn water of the Great Bath form a sacred pathway that speaks of a different kind of wisdom, one of community, cleanliness, and a quiet, orderly devotion that was woven into the very fabric of their world, a testament to a sophisticated harmony between the earthly and the divine that we are still struggling to fully understand. Now we set sail on the vastest sacred pathway of them all, the open ocean. For the Polynesian people, the Pacific was not a barrier of empty, terrifying blue, but a familiar, star-lit highway, a pathway they called the Aramona, the path of the ocean. Theirs was the most ambitious migration in human history, a centuries-long saga of exploration that populated the most remote islands on Earth, from the solitary peaks of Hawaii to the dramatic shores of Aotearoa, New Zealand. And they accomplished this epic feat not with compasses or sextants, but by reading a living library of natural signs, guided by a cosmology that saw the entire universe as a sacred, interconnected map. The instrument of this journey was the voyaging canoe, or waka awayua, a masterpiece of nautical engineering. These were not simple dugouts but immense, double-hulled vessels, sometimes over 100 feet long, lashed together with a strong central platform that could carry dozens of people, along with their plants, animals, and everything needed to start a new life. They were sailing catamarans centuries before the West adopted the design, capable of incredible speeds and stability in the open ocean. But the true technology was not in the wood and rope. It was in the mind of the navigator, the PWO, a master who had undergone decades of training. This individual stood at the helm, not with a chart, but with a mental model of the Pacific, holding the positions of islands, the rhythms of currents, and the paths of stars in their memory. They were the living GPS for their people, the sacred guardians of the pathway. Their guidance system was a sophisticated science of wayfinding, a holistic art of observation that few cultures have ever matched. By day, they read the ocean itself. The subtle patterns of swells rebounding off distant islands could be felt through the hull of the canoe, telling the navigator of land beyond the horizon. They watched the flight paths of specific seabirds, knowing that the Manu o Ku, or white tern, would fly out to sea to fish but always return to land at night, pointing the way home. The color of the water indicated depth and the proximity of coral atolls, while clouds gathering in a certain formation often betrayed the presence of an island beneath them. But it was by night that the true path was revealed. They navigated by a star compass, memorizing the precise rising and setting points of over 200 stars. Each island was not just a dot on a map, but a star island, defined by the specific star that passed directly overhead. To reach Tahiti, you followed the star known as Sirius. The entire sky was a rotating celestial dome, and the navigator knew exactly which star to steer by at every hour of the night. This profound knowledge was preserved and transmitted through oli, or oral chants. These were not simple songs but dense, precise mnemonics that encoded navigational data, genealogies of the islands, and the stories of the gods who created them. A chant might describe the sequence of stars to follow to a specific island, list the succession of ocean currents one would encounter, and name the ancestral chiefs who first made the voyage, all in one. Reciting these chants was a ritual act, a way of invoking the memory of the ancestors and asking for their protection. The voyage itself was a spiritual quest. Before departure, priests would perform ceremonies to appease Cain, the god of the sea and creation, and to ensure the winds and waves would be favorable. The canoe was seen as a living entity, a vessel for the mana, or spiritual power, of the people it carried. Success was not just a matter of skill, but of maintaining Pono righteousness and balance with the natural and spiritual world. This incredible legacy was nearly severed by centuries of European colonization and the advent of modern technology. But in a powerful movement of cultural resurgence, Polynesian communities are reclaiming this sacred knowledge. The groundbreaking voyages of the Hokula, a modern replica of a traditional double-hulled canoe, have retraced the ancient star paths from Hawaii to Tahiti and around the globe using only traditional wayfinding methods. These journeys, led by master navigators like the late Maupiailog from Micronesia who shared his knowledge, have ignited a pride and a passion across the Pacific. They are more than historical reenactments. They are classrooms on the water, training a new generation in the environmental literacy of their ancestors. In an era of climate change where rising sea levels threaten the very islands the Polynesians first settled, this ancient wisdom is more relevant than ever. It teaches a deep, intimate connection to the environment, an understanding that to navigate the world, you must first learn to listen to it. The star paths are not a relic, they are a living pathway forward, offering a compass for sustainability, resilience, and remembering our place within a vast and wondrous natural world. What emerges from this grand tour of 27 sacred pathways is a stunning revelation. Separated by vast oceans and thousands of years, cultures that could never have known of each other's existence were all answering the same deep human call in remarkably similar ways. It's as if a single, universal question was whispered into the soul of humanity, and these pathways were the diverse, beautiful, and ingenious responses. The specific gods might have different names, the landscape's unique features, but the underlying architecture of belief reveals a shared blueprint for what it means to be human in a vast and mysterious universe. At the heart of every single one of these pathways lies the fundamental human quest for meaning. From the Maya priest ascending El Castillo to witness the descent of Kukulkan, to the Buddhist monk sitting in meditation on the Silk Road, to the Native American youth alone on a vision quest, the driving force is the same, a burning desire to understand our place in the grand scheme of existence. These pathways provide a structured answer to that overwhelming question. They offer a map when we feel lost, a script for the soul's journey when the destination is unknown. They transform the terrifying void of the unknown into a navigable landscape with signposts, rituals, and a final goal, whether that's reaching the field of reeds in the Egyptian afterlife, achieving enlightenment on the Buddhist Eightfold Path, or simply finding one's personal songline in the Australian outback. They are universal tools for making sense of the senseless. This search for meaning is almost universally expressed through a profound connection to nature and the cosmos. Our ancestors did not see themselves as separate from their environment. They were active participants in a living, conscious universe. The Polynesian navigator feeling the swell of the ocean and reading the star paths, the Taoist pilgrim absorbing the kai of a sacred mountain, the druid conducting a ritual in a grove of ancient oaks, all of them were engaging in a constant, reciprocal dialogue with the world around them. The celestial corridors of the Maya, the dragon lines of Chinese Feng Shui, and the solar alignments of the Inca Trail all demonstrate a sophisticated understanding that human fate was intimately tied to the rhythms of the sun, the moon, the stars, and the earth itself. These pathways are a powerful reminder of an ecological wisdom we are only now, in our age of climate crisis, beginning to desperately rediscover. Furthermore, these sacred routes consistently use ritual as the primary vehicle to navigate life's most difficult transitions. Birth, puberty, marriage, death, times of war, times of planting and harvest, these are universal human experiences fraught with uncertainty and anxiety. The pathways provide a script. The labyrinth of Minon Crete ritualized the inner journey of confronting one's fears. The Jewish Passover Seder transformed a historical event into an annual, participatory journey from slavery to freedom for every generation. The Hajj pilgrimage uses powerful, symbolic actions to enact submission, sacrifice, and unity. These rituals are not empty superstitions, they are psychological technologies. They create a container for powerful emotions. They mark a clear before and after in a person's life, and they leverage the power of symbolism and community to guide an individual safely through the disorienting process of change. They are the handrails on the staircase of personal transformation. Perhaps the most ingenious feature of these pathways is their brilliant blending of the physical and the metaphysical. They understand that a journey of the spirit is often best undertaken with the body. The sheer physical exertion of walking the Camino de Santiago, climbing the steps of a Mesopotamian ziggurat, or hauling a canoe across the Pacific Ocean has a powerful effect on the mind. It strips away the ego, quietens the incessant chatter of daily worries, and forces a focus on the present moment, the outer journey facilitates the inner one. The blistered feet of the Hindu pilgrim on a yatra mirror the soul's struggle through samsara. The Viking's perilous sea voyage is a physical metaphor for the soul's journey to Valhalla. This holistic approach acknowledges that we are not just brains on sticks, but embodied beings whose spiritual understanding is deeply rooted in physical experience. Ultimately, these pathways are not static relics. They are dynamic frameworks for building identity, preserving memory, and forging community cohesion. The griot's storytelling routes wove together the collective identity of West African villages. The Jewish diaspora created portable pathways of memory through ritual objects and texts that maintained a unified identity across millennia and continents. The Roman Via Sacra was a physical engine for reinforcing civic pride and political power. These pathways tell a people who they are, where they came from, and what they value. They are the stories a culture tells itself, acted out on the grand stage of the landscape itself, ensuring that the core values and history are not just learned intellectually but are felt, experienced, and lived by every member of the community. And finally, their incredible adaptability is key to their enduring power. The sacred groves of the Druids may have been cut down, but the reverence for nature finds new expression in modern ecological movements. The physical journey to an oracle at Delphi has transformed into the modern quest for guidance through therapy, coaching, and personal retreats. The ancient star paths of the Polynesians are being revived not just for cultural pride, but as a teaching tool for environmental stewardship. These pathways evolve because the human questions they answer are eternal. They are not brittle commandments frozen in time, but living traditions that retain their core spiritual values while adapting their form to new technologies, new social structures, and new understandings of the world. They prove that the most enduring wisdom is not rigid but resilient, always finding new ways to guide us home. Our journey through these 27 sacred pathways brings us to a powerful realization about the human story. It shows us that across every continent and every era, our ancestors shared a common impulse to map the invisible, to find meaning in the movement from one point to another, and to build structures, both physical and spiritual, that connected their daily lives to something vast and eternal. These pathways were the spines of their civilizations, the foundational frameworks that gave shape to their worlds, supported the weight of their beliefs, and allowed their greatest cultural, architectural, and philosophical achievements to stand the test of time. What is so striking is the diversity of form these spines took. For some, the pathway was a literal road of stone, like the Inca trail ascending through the clouds or the processional way of Babylon shimmering under the desert sun. For others, it was a metaphysical river like the Egyptian journey through the Duat, or a constellation of stars guiding a voyaging canoe across the Pacific. Some were etched into the landscape itself, like the Aboriginal Songlines, while others were inscribed on the human heart through disciplined practice, like the Buddhist Eightfold Path. Yet whether made of rock, starfire, or story, they all served the same profound purpose. They were tools for navigation, not just across physical space, but across the inner landscapes of fear, hope, and the relentless search for purpose. The timeless lessons these pathways offer are perhaps more critical now than ever before. In an age of environmental crisis, they remind us of a world based not on domination but on reciprocity, a deep, sacred conversation with the natural world. The Taoist pilgrim absorbing the Kai of a mountain, the Druid revering a sacred grove, the Polynesian navigator reading the language of the ocean swells. They all understood that humanity is not separate from nature, but an integral participant in a living, conscious cosmos. Our modern challenges of disconnection and fragmentation echo the very human needs these pathways were designed to address. the need for community, for shared stories, for rituals that mark our passages and bind us together. The ancient Greek traveling to Delphi for guidance and the modern seeker walking the Camino for clarity are ultimately on the same quest, using a sacred corridor to find their way through life's uncertainties. This does not mean we must simply replicate the past. The call is not to rebuild ziggurats or sacrifice goats on ancient altars. The invitation is instead to recognize the underlying patterns of these sacred pathways and to forge new ones suited to our time. We can create modern rituals that honor personal and collective transitions. We can design our cities and homes with the Feng Shui principle of living in harmony with our environment. We can embrace the griot's wisdom by becoming better storytellers, passing on knowledge and values through narrative and art. We can even see our digital networks not just as tools for distraction, but as potential pathways for global connection and understanding, much like the Silk Road once was. The enduring human spirit that built those 27 pathways is still within us, capable of drawing new maps that lead us toward a future of greater harmony, wisdom, and connection. Thank you for walking these hidden corridors of history with us. These stories of starlight and stone are a testament to the incredible ingenuity and spiritual depth of our shared human family. We would love to hear which of these pathways resonated most deeply with you. Was it the celestial engineering of the Maya, the silent mystery of the Indus Valley, or the resilient memory of the Jewish diaspora? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into the spine of ancient civilizations, please subscribe for more journeys into the heart of mythology.